Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Keeping You Company If You Need It video. Yeah, I know there's no driving, just we'll get that out of the way straight away. I'm playing a little bit of Stardew for you today. Basically, I want to do some more driving, but ATS and ETS have been a little bit uncooperative with my computer. I'm going to just say that my computer's getting old. That'll be the excuse I'm going with. But I thought, well, let's have a little bit of Stardew Valley. It's a nice really chilled out game. I'm not playing this live as I'm talking. I recorded the footage a little while back. It's a nice chilled game that I can play in the evenings while I'm listening to a podcast or something. So there you go. So you've got a couple of hours of Stardew to look forward to. This is a very special episode because it's not just me who's going to be keeping you company today. I have a special guest with me. We'll do proper introductions, but my perspective of this guy is that he's probably my most loyal YouTube subscriber in terms of watching every single thing, regardless of how shit it is that I've put out, regardless of what sort of backlog he's got to work through. Always checks out the videos and always leaves a comment, regardless of what the video is. So much so that between us, we joke that they are comments to keep you company. We've got Urukimania with us. How was that pronunciation,
Hey,
by the way? Was that good? Was that better?
that was fine.
Because we just call you a rook.
Aruki,
That's the thing.
Aruki Mania. Yeah, that's right. Aruk is fine. Whatever you want to call me.
Aruki Mania. There you go.
Yeah,
Nice. How are you?
yeah. Good. I'm happy to be back on the channel, and it's fun to be here in a different context. Normally, I'm co-commentating a game of Fury of Dracula when I'm not, writing out everything in the text comments on all of your amazing videos.
Oh, you're too kind. Thank you very much. I'm going to say I am a terrible friend in terms of like the amount of detail you put into like checking out my videos, and then every so often I check out one of your videos. I feel so bad about it. It's a very lopsided
Well,
relationship that
I
we've
feel
got.
like my YouTube series is incredibly niche, right? There's people who still care about Bloodborne in, 2024, 9 years after it came out, and people who are interested in translation and me talking through in incredible complex detail, like weird nuances of wording between
And
two languages.
I was gonna mention that. Yes, you got your series. How many episodes? You're like 83 episodes in now, right?
Yeah, episode 83 just came out. I've been doing it for 7 years. This is like in the process of becoming 8.
Wow. And is the end in sight?
I hope so. I don't think I'll finish this year.
Do you know how many episodes it's gonna take?
No, I have no idea. Man, I could never have guessed. When I started, I thought it would take me maybe a couple years. And
Wow.
I mean, to be fair, the scope changed on me. So when I started the series, my idea was I just sort of play and comment very quickly and only call out a few things here and there. And then as I went, the more I went along, the more I realized, no, I just want to go in detail on everything. And I don't want to just say, okay, well, ignore 90% of what I just read or showed you on the screen in terms of comparisons and differences. I want to cover as much as I can in as much detail as I can. And once I sort of shifted that style, it also slowed down my release schedule because I used to try and get them out once every 2 weeks. That's completely impossible now.
So what's it now? It's like
It
once a
takes
month,
me
right?
takes me a month. Yep. So I'm on a monthly release schedule for that, and it's a lot of work. And I have taken a couple of breaks in between to sort of switch it up, and I've done sort of more traditional Let's Play style playthroughs with recordings of me going through what are called the Chalice dungeons, which is Bloodborne sort of has the main game content, which is all tied in with the story, and then it has these Chalice dungeons, which were created out of these like modular video game pieces that the developers reshuffled together in like hundreds of thousands of different configurations. And they end up having a lot of important stuff hidden in them, but the like ratio of stuff to talk about versus stuff to just experience is really different than the story scenes. This is actually something like this is nothing to do with our topic at all. I'm sorry, Scott. Sorry,
That's okay.
but
No
it's
problem.
something that's been fascinating for me making this series on Bloodborne. Is it's given me a very strong sense for how information dense different parts of the game are, and the more information dense a part of the game is, the harder it is for me to cover because like I said, I want to do all the detail. So I
Hmm.
need to like intersperse more like open sections of the game, like some of the chalice dungeons. This is what I'm doing now. I'll go into a content rich area that's in the DLC that came out, and then in order to give myself time to talk about anything, I'll jump over into the chalice dungeons where 90% of what I pick up is stuff that I've already talked about and doesn't really matter.
Right.
And I'll be able to space it out and give myself content to actually talk about things.
There's a real yeah. So there's a lot of balancing act that you got to do with that then.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of production, folks. Basically, what we're saying is that there's a lot of production in a Rook's videos, whereas me, I just turn on the camera and just start recording, and just whatever comes out my mouth comes out my mouth. Do you actually? I know this again. This is not the topic of our video, but I'm just interested. Do you script? Like, how much are you able to do sort of off the cuff, or are you like really fine tuning a script for every single video that you produce?
Oh, I script everything. When I started out, I did it off the cuff. And what I would do was I would like start recording and I would say something. So one of my big inspirations, actually, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and one of my big inspirations was Hardcore History by Dan Carlin. I mean, nothing in terms of like a direct like, oh, this person is doing like the same thing with a video game or whatever. He talks about history, right? But I really liked all of his podcasts, and his whole thing is he never writes a script. So he'll sit down and just talk about something extemporaneously in incredible detail. Like it's astonishing the facts that he can remember and quote and all that. And he'll talk about it just extemporaneously and then edit those pieces together to create a monstrous like 4 to 6 hour episode these days.
Right.
And so I thought, okay, well, I should try and replicate that process because it works so well for him. And that's how I started out doing the series. And I quickly found out that the way that my series is structured, where I like to plan out a route ahead of time, play the game ahead of time, and then talk over that footage, I can't just let the audio build into its own thing. I need to fit what I want to say into the segments that I have allotted to myself ahead of time in my like route planning.
Right.
So I will then go through and be like, okay, I've picked up this item. I think based off of what now is a lot of experience, this is going to take me about 5 minutes to say something on, and I'll play the game for 5 minutes, and then I'll bring up the next thing that I want to talk about. And so in order to actually fit the details that I need into that 5 minute section, I can't just extemporize the way that I did in the beginning. I have to have a script in order to get to the point and make it salient and move on.
Hmm. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I'm kind of the same. I mean, obviously, for most of my videos, I haven't scripted. I think the only one I ever scripted like properly was the fast horses one that I did,
I
and the
was
hunter
gonna
movement.
guess that one. I was
Yeah,
gonna guess that when you said there was one that you could think of that you scripted, I was probably the Fast Horses,
yeah.
because that one I think was the most cohesive in terms. It felt like I was watching a presentation, right?
Mm, yeah. Whereas I've done like the hunter guide one. It was a
Hmm.
presentation. Like, I always use PowerPoint to produce those sort of things, but that one was still off the cuff. I had like bullet points in front of me, and like key
Hmm.
things. Don't forget to say this, but the actual discussion was still quite off the cuff. I
Yeah, I
marvel.
remember. I
Oh, you go.
remember I threw you off on that one because you asked me about, as a newer player, what were things that were giving me trouble, and I was like, "How do I even control 4 hunters?" And you were like, "Now what do I do?" Because you weren't going to talk about it at all, so you had to
No,
throw it in
but
last minute.
yeah. Yeah, last minute assignment. Just quickly scribble extra bits at the end. Yeah, and before you turn it in. Yeah, I've noticed that, like, especially when I've done like conversations on the game and stuff, and then I thought, oh, that was quite succinct, you know, cohesive conversation I just had there. I felt like quite. I've been able to articulate myself very well, and I listened to it back. I'm like, oh my god, that was just a train wreck from start to finish. And even when I'm playing, like, I mean, in the game, I'm misquoting names and numbers, but in my brain it works. But when you just hear
Yeah.
it out loud, I'm like, oh my god. I mean, again, not the topic we're going to talk about, but you know, I've gone through doctorate studies, and as part of that,
Oh.
I had to present at conferences and such. And I couldn't bring a script to the presentation, but I
Hmm.
would script it more or less and talk about it. I remember forgetting in one of my presentations the most the most important result in my research that I'd done, I completely forgot to say it.
Oh no.
So,
Oh.
yeah. So I know I should really go to scripted, but yeah, I think just because of the style of video, right, it makes sense for you to be scripting, especially since you're very like I'm going to produce this very succinct 20 to 30 minute chunk, this block of information, and then as you said, you have to get
Hmm.
the timing of the footage behind it to match. Then yeah, it's
Yeah.
very good. Very good. So yeah, we should probably I say sorry, people who are watching, I know we're not talking about Stardew. Just you can watch me running around the farm, planting parsnips and just being a happy boy, basically. um so you haven't seen the footage either, Rook. So when you watch this video back, you'll see me running around with my
Yeah, I'll
watering
finally
can.
get to see what's happening in Stardew Valley and not really understand most of it because I've never played Stardew Valley.
Don't worry, there's not really much to understand, to be honest. You just run around and plant vegetables and harvest them, and then you have a good time and you go fishing and all that good stuff.
Nice.
It's
Well,
not that
sounds like a
complicated.
perfect video to have on while we're having a conversation to keep people company.
Absolutely, I agree. So before we go into our topic, I suggest we should. We've kind of alluded to it a little bit, but I guess we should probably just explain how we know each other. Um,
Sure.
in terms of because it's a bit random. Like I'm doing Fear of Dracula stuff, and you're doing, you know, very deep dive Japanese translation analytics of Bloodborne. That's not.
Yeah.
Those two things don't really overlap very much.
No.
Do you wanna take the lead? 'Cause I guess I can't really remember exactly how we first made contact. I guess it's all Strider's fault. Um,
Yeah, it is all Strider's fault. So he had played a game against you and Roscoe, and he was he because he this is why I script everything. Um, he had come over and he'd been into Fury of Dracula for a long time, but it's one of those games where good luck finding the right friend group to have everyone super excited to play it all the time. So, but he loved the game, didn't want to give up on it, and found the online community. And when he did so, he first found out about the online community through Quincy Morris. But it wasn't until he played you and Roscoe that he called me up and was like, "Man, you have got to watch this video. It's going to come out in like 4 months, and it's these guys are the funniest people, and it's like they're the dynamic duo. It was amazing, and I did great. Right? I'd never I'd never played on the competitive level before, but I was giving these guys a run for their money. It was so fun, and so I was like, okay, yeah, I'll check that out, and had to wait a while, but eventually,
yeah, sorry, YouTube backlog. That's what happens
yeah,
when you take a 2 month hiatus over summer.
yeah, you've got your own needs to like plan video releases around that aren't keeping Strider happy.
hmm
But yeah, when that finally came out, I checked it out and I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. These two people do seem like they're fun and they're having a good time. And I, wasn't as into Fury of Dracula as Strider, but still enjoyed the game. And so after that video came out, I was like, okay, well, I'll subscribe to this channel. And if that had been it, I don't know if we'd have met. Excuse me.
Probably not. No. We ended up
Yeah.
talking. I remember. Maybe it must have been Strider must have said, "Oh, this is my friend. Send him a message or something." I can't remember exactly how we ended up getting in
Yeah,
touch.
that's what it turned into because I was over his place another time. Strider and I know each other in real life, which is helpful. So we were hanging out and we started watching a Quincy Morris video, and we got partway through that, and we're like, okay, well, let's take a break, and then we came back, and we were like, all right, well, that was fun, but it seemed like the rest of the video was going to be a foregone conclusion at that point. He was like, "Well, let's try another Scott Sword video," and we put one on, and it was you playing against. I think you were playing against Roscoe, and it was just the funniest thing because you were. I think it was a tournament game, if I remember correctly, because you made a comment at one point about like I'm playing this like it's a friendly, and it's actually a tournament game
Mm.
where
Oh,
you were trying to.
is this the hospital shenanigans one?
Yeah, the hospital
Oh
shenanigans,
no.
where you
Yeah.
tried to hide over a kill to ambush a hunter when they were coming out of the hospital, and it revealed your location because this was before the Immortal update.
Way
And
before. Yeah.
yeah, and it was so much fun that I was like, okay, I need to go and leave a comment because So I'm kind of glad now that we talked about my channel and how it started out with just like zero. I used to count it a success if I got 10 people to watch my videos. And so I was like, all right, well, I've been on YouTube for a few years now, and I know that if people just watch your video and they give you a like, that's nice as a creator, and I should say as a small creator. Once you get like over a certain size, like I think this becomes a totally different situation. But when you're a relatively small sized YouTuber, uh, my experience was if people just watch your video and they give it a like, the numbers will only do so much for you in terms of your satisfaction, in terms of your dedication, in terms of your willingness to go forward and keep making videos. And what you really need to do is leave a comment, and that will like make someone's day. Just that you took the time to write something under the video and acknowledge that you enjoyed it. And the difference between that and just clicking the like button, I used to think when I was just watching YouTube that just clicking the like button, that's all they need to see, because it is still you showing your form of a form of appreciation on a YouTube video. And I don't want to diminish that too much, but I think it's on a different level when you leave a comment. So I started leaving comments, and then you were like, "Hey, we need to." I don't know if you said this to yourself like out loud or not. I'm putting words in your mouth. We need to like grow this community. Who's this person who seems really interested in Fury of Dracula? Let's get him online. And so you were like, "Hey," it reached out to me. It was like, "Contact me on Discord if you want to talk about whatever." And I was like, "Okay, all right, well." Make some good YouTube videos. I don't mind reaching out on Discord. I'm naturally a pretty shy person, but I was like, fine, all right, I'll accept. And I was talking to Strider again later, and I was like, I can't believe it. He just reached out to me because, and I've talked about this too. I think there's something of a TV psychology thing that goes on with YouTube, where it doesn't matter how big or small a channel is. The simple fact of a video existing on YouTube on someone's channel gives that person an authoritative voice. I think it's something kind of inherent to the way that YouTube works, and it's a little bit of like weird psychology, I guess. So Strider and I were both like, this guy, this huge YouTuber in Fury of Dracula is like putting us on his channel and inviting us to play these games. This is incredible. And I told Strider, I was like, I don't know if I want to do a 1v1. I think that would be overwhelming for me, but I would be okay if we did like a group game. And so between the three of us, we arranged a group game. And then in advance of that, you and Roscoe agreed to like show me the ropes. And Strider was like, this is perfect. It's the dynamic duo. They're back again. So yeah, that's the point where we actually started interacting, via voice chat and actually playing the game with each other. And that's where I'd say we truly like actually met. And that was the beginning of our friendship.
Yeah, I think now you said that, now that it's coming back to me now. It wasn't Strider. I remember now you leaving comments first and then me saying. Because I often do, because like Discord's quite an easy way to contact people. A lot of people in gaming are in Discord anyway. It's quite an easy social media to work with. It doesn't reveal any like personal information, so I don't mind handing my Discord out to lots of people.
Right.
It's not the same as like a Facebook or an Instagram or something. And yeah, it's just then that now rings a bell. Yeah. So yeah, we obviously interacted through our sort of our group games with Strider and Roscoe, and then obviously you've done some commentating and live streaming with the tournaments that have been happening.
Yep.
So yeah, I think I was in that step where if there's anybody around who's passionate about the game, I wanted to tell them about the community. Let's just say there's just the whole community. It's very small. Again, it's kind of like saying to Bloodborne, right? It's a niche game. But the people who are involved are very dedicated to it, and we all get on well with each other. So yeah, and then we've kind of through talking just through Discord and stuff, I think we've kind of realized there's quite a lot of like mutual interests that we have, despite different backgrounds and things. So this is kind of why I wanted to get you on to do a couple of these episodes for keep you company, because I feel like we could have quite a lot of discussion rather than me just rambling on for 2 hours about my woes and all my worries and things. So
yeah, not that there's anything wrong with that. I've enjoyed all of your keeping you company videos.
Oh, thank you very much. As you left like Bible long comments on.
Yeah, that was the one where I tried to come up with my Desert Island discs and justify which songs were going to be which. That was where I found out that YouTube comments had a character limit.
Yeah. You're the one. You're the
I,
one who
I had to.
you tried to go further where no man had gone before.
That's right. I had to break it into two. I was like, why isn't this posting? And I thought, because sometimes like if I include links, YouTube
Yeah,
doesn't always like that. So I was like,
YouTube
maybe I'll just
hates
delete
links.
all. Yeah, I'll just delete these links. And so I got rid of them, and it still wouldn't post. And then I tried something else, and it still wouldn't post. And I was like, what is going on? Is it a character limit thing? And I went and I like searched, and I found out, yeah, there's a character limit. It's 10,000 characters. And I looked at what I wrote, and it was like 14,000 characters or something like that. It was significantly over the limit. And I was like, okay, let me try and edit this. And so I went through and I tried to cut down as much of what I had said that I didn't think was necessary as possible. And it was still like 12,000 characters. I was like, I'm not wasting any more time on this. I'm just going to make two comments.
Very good. Just
Yeah,
double down. A great two
that's
10,000 character comments.
that's right. What I should have done if I hadn't been worn down by all the editing, I should have like reinstated everything I said and gone on at greater length because I knew I had a higher limit.
Yeah. You probably would have broken that limit too, though. That's the problem. You're like, oh no, I'm gonna get to
Yeah.
three. Yeah, YouTube hates links, by the way. It's very frustrating. I mean, I know, I get why in terms of like, they don't want bots spamming links and goodness what else, but it's very
Yeah.
infuriating when you actually want to post a legitimate link to something,
Yes.
and then it's like, no, no, I'm not, and it doesn't even tell you. It's not like it says your comment cannot be posted because there's a link. It just says it posts the comment, but the comment never appears.
Yep.
Uh, Very infuriating. The
Agreed.
time when
I found out there's actually like a secret I think like a rating system for commenters. So there are some channels where I've been commenting steadily on for a long time. I should probably test this out on your channel, Scott Sword, because I've been commenting on your channel a lot. Um, and so there are some channels that I can actually post links on. It wasn't until I started posting
oh,
links on some channels that I don't comment on quite as regularly that I realized what you said was happening, which was I would post the comment and it would just never post. Just get
oh,
lost to the ether. And I was like, okay, well, why does it work on this channel and not this other channel? And you can always post stuff on your own channel, is what I've learned. Is
yeah.
because I post links all the time where I like to provide references, right? I cite my sources. And
Hmm.
so I go and I put those in the description, or if I'm leaving comments, I like to like put my references at the bottom of the comments. And it completely throws me off when I can't include those links as sources anymore.
It's very infuriating. I had it
Yeah.
when Quincy Morris went on to Legendary Tactics. I don't know if you know them. They're like a tabletop board game digital adaptation, like YouTube channel. They discuss and review digital adaptations of board games and stuff. And he went on there to do an interview about 18 months back. And I remember commenting saying, "Oh, this is a good chat, but by the way, there's a Discord community, blah 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 blah." And Legendary Tactics even replied to me and said, "Oh, cool, give us the link." I posted the link to the
Ah.
Discord, lost to the void.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like as the content creator you get a link. Like it's not like you've got a comment that you can review and decide if you want to post it or not. Just it
Right.
just gets lost completely. As even then in live streams, right? I've done it where people have been trying to link like somebody else's YouTube channel, like just say if I'm live streaming, but then somebody's trying to post your link or something, right? And then they can't
Mm-hmm.
do it. I'm like, oh my god, I have to do it right, and then I have to find the link, and it's very infuriating. It'd be quite
Agreed.
good if you can just do it in your like YouTube studio behind the scenes. If you could decide if people can post links or not, I don't know, or you could review comments if it has a link
Yeah.
rather than just
Yeah.
disappearing
If
forever.
so, yeah. So you can mark it as held for review. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very annoying.
Yeah. But like you said at the start, though, I do understand that links are sort of a touchy subject and can, there's all sorts of problems that you could have by just letting people post links whenever they wanted. So,
Yeah, I mean, I get spam comments sometimes anyway, because I'm the same as like small. I mean, I'm gonna say I'm a small YouTuber compared to you. You have like 4 times my subscribers, more than 4 times my subscribers. So you're the big fish compared to me. But I'm the same. Like every time you go into like the YouTube Studio app on the phone or whatever, and you see the comments really clearly because you're not getting flooded with comments. So every new comment pops up and you see it. But
yep.
yeah, I get like spam comments. I'm just like, really?
Yeah,
It's very infuriating. Oh well. And welcome to the YouTube discussion podcast, everybody.
that's right.
We'll move on to our own. This is like, did you ever watch? Oh, I watch. Did you ever listen to Hello Internet?
No, I haven't heard of that one.
Oh, I wish it was still going. That's my. It was a podcast between two educational YouTubers, CGP Grey, who's from the
Oh
States,
yeah. Hmm.
and Brady Heron, who is from Australia, but he lives in the UK and he does a lot of science-based videos. So he does periodic videos, and I'm not going to forget them all. That's really terrible. Number file. Uh,
Oh, okay.
I can't remember them all now, but they did a podcast together called Hello Internet, and it ran for about 4 or 5 years, I think. And they would talk about lots of different things. They often talk about their personalities and life in the UK and life in Australia and American stuff, but they often would have like a YouTube section of the podcast. So I feel like we've just done that.
Ah,
We've done like our
that's
Hello
right.
Internet YouTube portion where we just rant about YouTube for 20 minutes and then we talk about something else.
Yeah, that's totally what we did.
So I guess we should probably get onto our main topic. We'll go on to YouTube another day. We can keep going. So the thing we wanted to
Undoubtedly.
yeah, because it's going to be a recurring topic, no doubt. The thing we wanted to talk about in particular, we've got quite a lot of like shared interests and things. In particular, not exactly the same experience, but hence why we could talk about it, is we both have experience of living in other countries. Obviously, for those of you who don't know, um, I am not in Scotland anymore. I'm living in Spain. And your good self. Obviously, we've talked about the translation born series,
Hmm.
looking at the English to Japanese translation and all that stuff. But you also did spend time as well living in Japan.
I did. Yeah, I lived in Japan for 5 years.
Wow! And how long ago was this? Because I don't know how long have you actually been back in the
This
states?
was, I left, I got back about 10 years ago. So I went to Japan basically straight out of college um, in 2008. I stayed until 2013. And then this is all sort of based off of the schedule for the program that takes you in and whatever. It all starts up in the summer. So I got there in August and then I ended up staying an extra 3 months after I was done because I then ended up walking the length of the country. So I got back like at the very end of 2013.
Right. Okay. And was it like a specific? 'Cause I know with certain countries, there's like a very specific scheme that you have to go through to get on it. Were you having to were you able to work like all the time you were there, or was very much you had to limit the amount of working hours you did and all that sort of stuff?
So what I did was I applied for a program called the JET program. It stands for the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program. And they work with people who speak English. They want native English speakers. It can be from anywhere all over the world, as far as I know, as far as I understand, anyway. And if you are a native English speaker and you're willing to teach English and you're willing to go to Japan, they will find a placement for you within a local board of education. And so it's this whole thing. I think a lot of their applicants are people who are just graduating out of college. But when I was there, I was also working with people who were like in their 30s and 40s or like transitioned from some other field. I think at the beginning of the program, they sort of favored people who wanted to learn Japanese because that meant they had a strong interest in the country. But then
Right.
they found out the interest in the country was a little bit too strong because once that people would use this as an excuse to go over to Japan, get a job, and then leave in the middle of a contract. And they had problems with that. This is what I've heard.
Oh.
And so I don't know. I don't know if it's 100% true, but there's probably something to it. Um, and so they've shifted more towards valuing people who want to get on the educational aspect side of things because it puts you in local schools and you work um, as a teacher alongside a Japanese teacher of English.
Okay,
So
so it's not even like in private academies. You're actually in like the main school like curriculum then, in terms of
yes,
helping out. Wow. Okay.
yeah, and we get yearly contracts, and for the most part, there's not a huge question as to whether or not they're going to renew. Like unless you're really awful and are still having a good time, uh, you'll probably get your contract renewed. This isn't to say everyone has a great time in the JET program. There are some people who go to Japan and it's just not for them. It's just not there where they should be, and they find out very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
and they leave. I think something like 50% of people. I could be completely wrong on that percentage, but a significant number of people drop out in the first year, and they think they're up for it, and then they realize they need a change, or maybe they're up for something, but the specific situation that they got settled in wasn't working for them, or just something about life. I remember we went to this intro lecture, and this sort of gets into part of one of the things I wanted to say. When I first went to Japan, we had an introductory lecture through the JET program about this is what you can expect from culture shock,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like really good. I was very impressed by the talk that this presenter gave. I can't remember who he was, sadly, but I remember being very impressed by his presentation, and it generally sort of bore out to be true to my experience of what it was like, sort of adjusting to living abroad in Japan. So, but in that presentation, one of the things that the presenter said was a large number of people will drop out even at the first day. They won't make it past the initial presentation because they'll realize, this is their first time ever leaving their home country, and they'll realize this isn't for them, or they'll have a terrible experience, or maybe, like I said before, something else in their life happens, and they realize they can't commit the way that they thought they could,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to go home even as early as the first day. So,
Wow.
yeah, but in general, like if you go there and you're having a good time, chances are you're going to get the contract renewal. There was sort of one question mark because when I went anyway, things have probably changed a bunch in the past decade. But when I went, it was you could renew pretty much without a question for the first 3 years, and then you could not do more than 5 years on this program. They wanted to make sure that they weren't just sticking with the same people. They wanted a place for new people, new faces to come in all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so they had a maximum of 5 years. And basically anyone could stay for 3, but if you wanted to get over this jump and go from 3 to 4, uh, they would have to go through some other process to justify your staying for that extra year or two. From 4 to 5 wasn't as big of a jump, but that was the way the program was set up at the time.
Wow. Okay.
That's why it was 5 years, and I was working the whole time through this program. And they also did limit, to another part of your question, they did limit what you could do outside of it. Part of the contract that you sign when you, actually, this might be different depending on where you are because you sign with the local board of education. But part of the contract that I signed when I went to the local board of education in Hachinohe, which is the city where I lived, up in the northern part of the country, uh, they were saying, okay, well, if you sign on to this contract, you can't be doing anything on the side.
Yeah.
So,
Sure.
yeah, I was fine with that because it gave me more time to study.
In terms of studying Japanese.
Yes, yeah. So my goal, I was one of the people they didn't want that much of, because I was very focused on learning Japanese because I knew I wanted to be a translator. So my goal was I want to stay there as long as I can because I studied Japanese in a little bit in high school and a decent amount in college, but I knew I wasn't at the level I needed to be if I wanted to work as a translator. So I was like, I need to get my Japanese up to snuff, stay here for as long as I can, and then transition into translation.
Okay. So from that initial stuff, I've got a couple of questions coming to my mind. I'm trying to work out
Mm-hmm.
which one I want to ask first. So, okay. So my first one, because it's something that is relevant to Spain as well. So in terms of like them trying to look for native English speakers, did you have to provide any qualifications in terms of your English ability? I know obviously being a native English speaker that, did you have a qualification in teaching English before you went?
No, no, they don't require teaching qualifications. I think they're a bonus. They are not required. They also did not require any certification of my English ability. That might be in part because I was doing this out of the U.S. Right? I think there are some other countries around the world where they might ask for English certification.
Right.
Um, but in my experience, that wasn't necessary either.
Because
They
I've kind of
did have a very long and exacting application process. It was not easy to apply. And I part of that involved a background check. I had to get my fingerprints taken and submitted to the FBI so that they could be sure that my criminal record was clean.
good grief.
Yeah, I had
That's
to get a
very
chest x-ray
that's
because of
intense.
the yeah. I had to get a chest X-ray because of the sort of fear around respiratory illnesses spreading through Japan.
Oh, okay.
So I think, yeah, that's sort of in the aftermath of the SARS outbreak.
Hmm.
I think that requirement was imposed. So yeah,
Interesting.
it was a very exacting process, and I actually didn't make it. Technically, I was on the on call list. Someone had to drop out for me to get into the program. So
Well, good for you though that they did drop out in the end. But good.
yeah,
That's a lot of hoops. I dread to think what hoops you have to jump through now with COVID being a thing. In
yeah,
terms of
I have no idea. It's got to be completely different now.
yeah, that's a different it was like a different generation almost in terms of the
Yeah,
everything that's happened since. Yeah.
yeah, it
Because
really is.
it's a thing I've noticed here. Because like you can just as a native English speaker, people just take your word that you can speak English properly, and like there you go,
Yeah,
there you go. You can teach?
yeah,
I'm like I don't know
yeah,
any English grammar. Sorry, people. I'm
yeah.
winging this.
It can be. People can ask you questions that will really put you on the spot. I'm trying to think of like an actual like concrete example, but I remember just getting some questions, being like, "I've literally never thought of English this way before."
Mm,
But that actually gets to something of a broader point. I had some like broader things that I think will apply very generally to at least my experience. I don't know. You can tell me how true they sound to you.
mm-hmm.
But the broad takeaways that I sort of have noted down are, first of all, exposure to another culture can reveal unseen aspects of our own. So that's sort of what I'm thinking. Like, I've never thought about English this way before because I've never come at it from the perspective of someone who's trying to learn it as their second language.
Sure.
Sort of gets at that unexpected angle. Um, and I've also seen that sometimes being surrounded by another culture can strengthen your own attachment to parts of your culture.
Hmm.
And I also think that like this, it's not just you who has your eyes open when you're interacting with people from another culture, but they will often find themselves in the position that I was sort of describing earlier, where like I'll ask them a question about Japanese, and they've never had to think about Japanese that way before. Um, and that one, like, so your experience of another's culture can make visible parts of their culture that are invisible to them, and
Yeah.
that can then color the experience that they have when they're talking to you.
Hmm. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty spot on. The differences, obviously, between the UK and Spain are not going to be as extreme, just
Mm-hmm.
purely because of distance and obviously, being on the same continent and things. Obviously, British and Spanish people do mix more. Um,
Yeah, I was going to
but
ask about that.
there you go. Yeah, well,
I, I was going to ask, like, are you a visible minority, right? When you're like, if you're just sitting looking out a window on a train, can someone look at you and be like, oh, that guy's not from around here?
depends. If I'm wearing short socks and sandals and things, then probably yeah. No, joking. I don't do that. Um, ah, I would probably say yes. Um, obviously just because of complexion. It's not obviously not. I mean,
Mm,
thinking about Americans and Japanese, physically, it's not
yeah,
as
right. Well, as a
difference.
because I'm white, right? So I stand out like a sore thumb
Mm,
anywhere in Japan
yeah,
that I go. People can like look across a room. They don't have to think twice if they see me on a train or anything. They just know, like this
yeah,
person is a foreigner.
yeah. Uh, me, it's not so bad. I am a little bit ginger, so immediately that's a little bit unusual. And I
Hmm.
am probably a little bit whiter than most people. But there are some, quite white people here who are native. So it just depends on skin complexion and stuff. I think the minute you notice is just then the minute you speak.
Mm, yeah.
The way that it's not even just the way you speak, but just not the just the accent and the intonation, but the way you hold yourself in a
Hmm.
conversation, right? I think I spoke about it in a previous video, but the general difference between Spanish people and British people, again, I'm stereotyping. I know stereotypes are a bit dangerous, but in general, Spanish people are much louder. They're more
Mm,
direct.
mm,
They are very good if you're in like a really crowded bar or restaurant. They're very good at like elevating their voice to cut through that noise. Uh, on the other hand, then I'm like this really sort of like meek, you know, quiet voice
Hmm.
generally, apart from when playing Fear of Dracula. Um, you know, polite British guy who just cannot raise his voice. Or if I feel like I'm raising my voice, I feel like I'm shouting.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I probably said it in the video, but I hear conversations between my wife and my mother-in-law. Uh, if I spoke to my own mother in that tone, that is an argument.
Hmm.
It's just the pitch here is just so much higher. And then also then of course as soon as I open my mouth, they can even if my Spanish isn't that bad, they're like, we can tell you're not from here, which is fine.
Yeah.
Like I don't mind that. Um,
Hmm.
I think the thing with me is like, again, I keep saying I'm Scottish. I'm not really Scottish. I was born in England,
Hmm.
and when I was really young, my when I was like 3, my parents moved from basically the south of England up to the north of Scotland. So that's quite a big difference. And I was like the first like English kid in like the little village where we lived for quite a long time. Other
Hmm.
English kids came later, but then. So even as quite a young child, I was kind of used to being this sort of minority even though I'm
Hmm.
like Scottish and English, how different can you be? You have no idea, people. That's a story for
Huh.
another day. We should get Roscoe in here. We can have that conversation. But
Yeah.
I've
That'd be
always been used to
interesting.
being a minority in that sense. And also then
Hmm.
of certain other aspects of my life, I'd always view myself as a minority, like figure the way I act in certain situations and my tastes and things. So I'm kind of used to it. So I don't
Hmm.
mind. Um, but I think it's probably being a minority does not draw attention to myself.
Yeah.
Like people know I'm a minority, but it's not in the sense of like I don't know what it's like in Japan, but I've heard stories. One of my friends went to China to do a bit of work,
Hmm.
and I mean, okay, he's quite, you know, he is very very ginger, so
Okay.
he sticks out like a sore thumb. But obviously, then not having also the Chinese complexion and physically, obviously from his face does not look Chinese. He could sense as he was walking through there were people like taking photographs of him because he
Wow.
looks
Yeah.
so different.
Yeah.
So I
There
don't
are
know.
places in Japan. There are places in Japan where they will do that.
Mm-hmm. And how?
It sort of depends where you go. People have different levels of familiarity with foreigners. The area where I was staying was it's fairly close to a military base, a U.S. military base in Misawa.
Mm,
So people were used to seeing people come from that military base and come into town, right? Because Hachinohe was the nearest city. So people were relatively used to seeing foreigners in that area. But I remember it. Not everyone was used to it, and particularly because I was going into the school system, I would sometimes be the first foreign person that any of these kids had ever seen.
mm-hmm.
And so in order for this story to work, viewers need to understand that my first name is Matthew, and the the way that Japanese speakers tend to pronounce th sound is not like the way that an English speaker would. It's a sh, um, kind of like
Uh,
you're telling someone to be quiet. So when you pronounce my name with a Japanese sort of pronunciation, style of pronunciation for my name, it is Mashu, not Matthew.
mm-hmm.
And this kid like looked up at me. His eyes got super wide, and he was like, Mashiro Sensei," which sounds like Mashu, but Shiro is the Japanese word for white. So he was calling me Mr. Pure White Teacher, right? It was the cutest thing.
Oh,
I can tell I just blew his mind.
that's awesome. I think that's the thing. There's like that sense of wonder, right? As soon as you get somebody coming in who is not from where you're from. I don't know what it was like
Mm-hmm.
with you, but like with me, you know, any opportunity I get, I will like force feed like Scottish culture down everyone's throat who's willing to listen to me. Um, and that sense of wonder, like, oh, my everything's different. Like especially like the classic one is like the Scottish men wearing kilts.
Oh yeah,
So the minute, like, I mean, it doesn't matter what sort of social situation it is. And I'm like, oh, because it's true. Like recently, I've been to a couple of weddings back in Scotland, so I've been wearing the kilts. I just instantly just get the photo out, and they're like, oh my goodness, right? And they just turn into like little. Even if I'm talking to adults, they're turning into like 5-year-old kids, getting giddy just looking at the sight of these men wearing skirts and stuff.
yeah.
because it's something that they just don't see. So
Mm.
it's yeah.
Yeah, it's really. I think you put your finger on it when you said there's that sense of like wonder to it. That's really nice.
Hmm.
There are some negative aspects to being an outsider, right? But there, at the same time, there's also some benefits.
Yeah, I think a lot depends on like who it is you interact with. If you can have
Mm.
people who are open-minded,
Mm-hmm.
then you're gonna get along fine.
Yeah.
I've had. I mean, I've got to be really honest. Like again, I have advantage being yeah, I am a minority, but I'm still white. So I'm not gonna face
Mm-hmm.
the same sort of discrimination that unfortunately somebody maybe from there's a lot in Spain. There's a lot of migrant workers from Africa. They come over for the agricultural season, all that sort of stuff. They would
Mm-hmm.
probably face a lot more discrimination than someone like me. So like I've
Yeah.
never been like actively discriminated against.
Yeah, and
So
it's
like
the same. It's sort of similar, not exactly the same, but it's sort of similar with me in Japan, where I fit their idea like of being what an American is, right? I'm a white guy. So they're like, oh, it's this like klutzy, familiar American dude who I've seen in all the movies and TV shows and things. And they have like a like an image of me that will jump to their head.
Mhm.
But it's a different experience if you have darker skin, right? Or
Right.
if for example you look like you're Japanese. If they can't tell you, right? So someone who's American but is of Asian descent will sometimes have very negative experiences in Japan because people will expect them to be Japanese.
Right.
And then it's a surprise and they don't have those ready formed like preconceived ways that oh, foreigners are going to be this way. To interact, they're like, oh, it's this Japanese person who's being super rude to me or something like that, right? So
So it's almost like they they might be a little bit, depending on who the person is, they might be a little bit more lenient on you because they know, all right, he's a foreigner, he doesn't know 100% of like how our society functions and certain social codes and
yeah,
stuff. It's fine, we'll give him a free pass.
yeah, there's definitely a certain amount of leeway that you get from people like looking at you and realizing, oh, this person doesn't fully understand our culture. They'll cut you some slack.
Hmm.
But if they're not expecting that, they won't cut you that slack, and then you'll have a very different experience.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way round in terms of like yeah,
Yeah,
having like a
there was one
American of Japanese descent or something. Yeah.
yeah there was one person who I worked with who she was from Taiwan, but she was a native English speaker. She had great English. Um, and we were coming back off of our lunch break. We were coming back from like going to the local food supermarket, and we were in the parking lot, and this Japanese guy sees the three of us talking and decides to shout at us. If you're in Japan, you should be speaking Japanese. And I guarantee you, he would not have yelled that if there wasn't someone in the group who looked like they were Japanese.
Wow. Good grief.
Yeah.
Obviously, but she wasn't
So
Japanese, right?
right, she was. Yeah, she like tricked his senses, and it just completely changed the way this guy decided to act around us.
Good grief.
Yeah,
But
it
it's
was.
not. It wasn't even like you were trying to talk to him in English. He just butted into your conversation.
No, yeah, no. We were walking by him in the parking lot, and he decided to yell at us,
Good grief.
which is not a very Japanese thing to do.
I was gonna say that doesn't strike me from the little I know. That
Yeah,
doesn't strike me. That's kind of, oh man, that's a sort of
yeah.
carry on I'd expect in the UK. Unfortunately, there's some very. I mean, the things like it's really awkward. I don't know what it's like in the States, but the UK is simultaneously a very multicultural place, but also
Hmm.
there are people who have like really like toxic xenophobic views, and we heard it all the time
Yeah.
with people complaining like, you know, people of another culture, and maybe they live in the UK, maybe they're visiting, doesn't matter, but they talk amongst each other
Mm.
in their own language, and they get shouted at for it. It's
Mm.
like, why on earth would they not talk to them in their mother tongue, or in this case for you, a language that is mutually intelligible between all of you?
Right.
Why on earth would you all struggle to try and speak Japanese when you know that there's another language you can fall back on that you can all speak more comfortably or whatever? Yeah, that's
Yeah. Yeah,
great.
and I mean, I think that's another thing. It just goes to show you, right? You've got individuals that are gonna buck the general trends wherever you are.
Yeah.
So I think most Japanese people, even if they're, some amount of Japanese people are probably going to think that sort of thing to themselves. Very few, I think, would actually yell at us like that guy did.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. They hold it in, right? They don't
yeah,
actually make a scene out of it.
right.
My other question, depending on the question I wanted to um, come back to, just because it's something you mentioned a while back, was when you had this cultural shock presentation, and you said
Mm.
that a lot of it actually bore out, yeah, those culture shocks you did actually experience. So my question was going to be though, did it dampen the extent of the shock, or did you still experience it with that full, when you discover a culture shock, you're like, oh my goodness, this is very different from back home, or because you knew about it
Well,
in
the
advance, you're
thing
like, it still hit you, but not with the same wallop, as I would say. Like
the
it wasn't as
thing
strong.
about my experience with that is I don't know if it was this presentation or not. The presentation definitely introduced one specific culture shock aspect of culture shock that I would not have guessed on my own and did sort of change my expectation. But it was more like, in terms of it being borne out, I was talking more about the general experience of like, okay, you're going to go through this honeymoon phase where everything's different and it's all exciting. Then you're going to go through this burnout phase where everything's different and it's all terrible. And then you're going to get to this acceptance phase where you're just like, yeah, it is what it is. And you're like you're through the ups and the downs and you've just sort of naturalized things. And it hit a point, like in the one specific thing was related to like the difference in like looking for a good bargain all the time. So I don't know if people in the UK are like this, but in the US, this is something that like I wouldn't have seen in myself until I came to the country. But well, the country, Japan. This is something that the guy had warned me about. Was in Japan, they don't always necessarily go for the best value. They'll go for things that are just like, okay, I'm not particularly hungry or thirsty in this moment, so rather than go for the best deal on this food or drink, I'll get a small, right? Even though it's not the best bang for your buck.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah. And so I was like, okay, that's different. And then I had that experience and was like, oh yeah, I was told about that by that guy. And so I wasn't like stunned. But the thing about my experience in Japan in general was I was not very shocked by my entry into Japanese society. And I don't know entirely how to encapsulate that. Like my experience when I went to Japan was like, oh, this is basically just like everywhere else. This is very normal. And the longer I stayed there, the more different things seemed to me. And what really hit me like a hammer was when I went back home.
Ah,
They call it reverse
reverse cult.
culture shock.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that like immediately exposed all the things that I had just internalized as normal in Japan, but that were not. And you remember when I was talking about like Japanese people like being able to pick me out like it was nothing.
Mhm.
Well, I was used to literally everybody around me looking Japanese. So I got home, I got off the plane in the States on my first trip back, and I was like, what are all these foreigners doing here?
How dare they?
What's going on? Yeah.
Wow, that's
So
amazing.
it's just, yeah, I'd like my parameters for normal had been completely reset. And like I couldn't get over just how different everything seemed to me. And so even though I had a very smooth experience going from my life in the States to my life in Japan, it was when I came home that it was just like, wow, everything's changed.
Mm.
And it sort of made me appreciate more and more. Again, the more time I spent in Japan, the more I realized, no, they really do different things here. And some of these changes, like I sort of dismissed, right? I was like, oh, they do like, so one thing that people would ask me about, because everybody wants me to tell them a story. Well, I shouldn't say this anymore because I'm not in this situation anymore. But when I was living in Japan and I was meeting people, everybody wanted a really funny shock story from me. And I felt really bad because I couldn't give it to them.
Ah.
So I had a few like go tos. And one of them was seeing cars driving on the other side of the road. And it, that was one of those things where it was like, yeah, I knew before I went to Japan that people are going to be driving cars on the other side of the road. But knowing something intellectually and having that lived experience is completely different. And readjusting yourself to like looking one way as opposed to the other when you're looking to see which ways you should be looking out when you're crossing the street.
Mm,
Uh, it takes some getting used to,
right.
and like my friends who learned to drive had it worse, but for me it was just like, okay, that's one of the things I can talk about because it really was a surprise. Even though I was like sort of mentally prepared for it, that was still a shock to me, just
Oh,
seeing literally the everyone driving on the other side of the road.
I had no idea that Japan drove on the left.
Yep.
I had no idea. Oh well, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yep.
Britain and Japan, the best countries driving on that side of the road.
There
I
you
think
go.
well, the thing for me, it's the opposite. I think it's because as a British person, we even though we obviously we all drive on the left hand side of the road, we also grow up with this. Well, at least I did anyway. Maybe I shouldn't speak for everybody, but I feel like I always had this sort of like social like construct drilled into me, or just seeing it that in the way we call it in continental Europe. My wife
Mm-hmm.
hates that terminology. It makes it seems like the
Oh,
UK
okay.
is not the UK is not Europe. We're stuck in the middle of the Atlantic. But on the continent, quote unquote, they drive on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So every time, at least for me, when I go over wherever it was Germany when I spent a little bit of time there, or Spain or wherever, my brain automatically kicks in and goes, yeah, 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 everything's on the other side. Whereas my wife, on the other hand, the first day that she arrived in Scotland, when she came over for the first time, went into the taxi or tried to get into the taxi after leaving the airport, and she instantly went to the driver's side.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, then prompt
Yeah.
hilarity when it's like, why is there a wheel here, right? So I
In
think that's
Japan, they open the door for you when you get into a taxi. So as you approach a taxi, if they think
uh,
you're going to be a customer, they open the door. They have like the driver has an automatic thing that they can pull that'll open the like rear
oh,
passenger door.
oh, we haven't
Yeah.
reached that
So
level. Yeah,
so you
we're
don't.
you're living in the year 3000 over there.
Yeah. So even though it blew my mind that the taxi was picking me up on the wrong side, I didn't make that particular mistake. But I did
Hmm.
make that mistake again when I came back home, and it was like, okay, I'm gonna go sit in the passenger side of the car, and I get into the driver's seat, and I'm like, wait a minute, how did
It's
I
all
get here?
wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to, because I'm, as I said in previous episodes, I'm learning to drive at the moment. I'm now doing the practical
Oh
tests or
yeah.
practical lessons at the moment. But I'm also at the same time watching videos
Mm.
of driving instructors from the UK for two reasons. Firstly, because it's quite tricky for me trying to manage the handling of the car, as well as
Hmm.
then having to listen to somebody speaking a language that is not my mother tongue.
Yeah. Hmm.
And like, if I was having a normal conversation with him, I'd be like, okay. The minute we stop and he does like theory with me when the car is stopped, I'm like, okay. But the minute I have to concentrate on not running anybody down and controlling this car and not stalling and all this sort of stuff, and then I've got this voice in my ear who's talking a language that I'm having to now process.
Yeah.
Um, and the number of times he tells me, right, when you get to the roundabout, take this exit, and then within 5 seconds, the information has disappeared from my brain because
Mm.
I've not processed it properly.
Hmm.
Um, so it's
Yeah, I
partly,
completely understand.
where was I going with that point? Oh yeah, partly. So yeah, so watching the instructor videos in English, partly so then I've got an English instructor telling me the instructions too, because then they might describe things in a way that I might better understand. And also then it means I can listen to it while I'm not actually in control of the car, so I'm a little bit more relaxed. I can just sit here with a cup of tea and listen to them. But it's also so then if at some point I do pass the test, hopefully soon, and I go back to the
Hmm.
UK during the summer and I want to do driving, my brain is already kind of like adjusting to the idea of you're going to be driving on the other side of the road. When you approach junctions, do this. When you approach roundabouts, do this, and so on. So I'm already trying to
What
like
gets
get that double thing going, but I don't know if it'll
what
work or
what
not. We'll have
gets
to see.
most people who learn to drive in the States and when they move to Japan, what gets them is how everything that they used to do with their right hand, they would have to do with their left.
Yeah, yeah,
They'd
that's
have
the
to
issue.
they'd have
Yeah.
to completely relearn the muscle memory.
Hmm.
That was the stumbling block.
At least the pedals don't shift. That'd be worse. If the pedals were all
Yeah.
reversed, that'd be horrible.
Oh yeah, that would be awful.
Since we've talked about cars before, I know you've told me in the States the vast majority of cars are automatic. What's it like in Japan? Do they still drive manual or are they mostly automatic?
I don't know about Japan because I looked up the stats, right? Because you had talked about how you were learning to drive manual.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, like, do they even sell manual cars here anymore? And I looked it up, and it was like, yeah, okay, there's like
1%.
1% of new car sales. I was like, yeah, that's right. They basically don't. Uh, but I didn't look it up for Japan. I will say, in my experience, like Japan tends to be looking for the next step forward in technology.
Right.
So they're like more prone to moving up to like cars that have all the built-in like TV screens and electronic features and hybrid vehicles and all that sort of thing. Of course, I'm talking hybrid because this was 10 years ago. I don't know what they're like now. That
Whereas
maybe
now
they're all
they'll be
moving towards electric.
yeah, fully electric now, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess they're all
So
automatic
those
then
are
because of that.
less manual. Those tend to be automatic. But
Yeah.
a lot of my friends had manual transmission cars, and I think that might be a relic of the fact that these are hand-me-down cars for whoever gets into the position,
Right.
and they don't want to replace them very often.
Mm-hmm.
So among the people that I knew driving in Japan, most of them were driving manual, but probably among the general Japanese public, that's moving towards automatic. But again, I haven't actually looked at stats for that, so that's just hazy impressions from me.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah.
just
And I
wonder.
want to
Yeah.
ask before because I can't believe I've got so many things that I wrote down as like things that might want to touch on. I haven't gotten to hardly any of them.
Hmm.
But I feel like I have to ask you since we've heard the story of how I got to Japan. How did you get to Spain?
Oh, okay. Um, Slightly different situation to you. There wasn't a program. Basically, it's all my wife's fault. Basically, this is what happens. People, you meet somebody from another country, and then eventually you just have to move with them. No, so basically, yeah. Without revealing like too many details, but basically, yeah, my wife and I met in Scotland, and she was studying over there. But then through various things, we spent a year together in Scotland. But then she was on a thing called Erasmus, which is basically a European-wide exchange program. So I mean, I know in the States you have exchange programs too, because I've met Americans who have come over to Scotland for 6 months or a whole academic year. Um, but basically, the way it works inside the European Union, which now the UK is not part of anymore. It's very sad.
Mm.
But basically, within the European Union, there's a thing called Erasmus, which is a dedicated student exchange program, which allows students to more easily go on these exchange programs. And the European Union will often fund a lot of the exchange programs, so they'll give like
Oh wow.
money for students to go. And now they've expanded the Erasmus program. I think they do it for like work placements now. I know of secondary schools who have school dedicated Erasmus programs, and they send like a group of say 10 kids over to Italy or Finland or wherever, and then then the exchange back the other way, and the European Union funds everything. So they're
Wow.
really, and a lot of the red tape around these exchange programs is very much reduced.
Hmm.
It was a quite good thing for me when I started university. My personal tutor, who I had for the first, I think 2 or 3 years before he left. No, actually, no, that's not true. That was the last 3 years before he left.
Hmm.
He was actually the coordinator of
Oh wow.
all these international programs, and he used to tell me, okay, proximity also helps, but he used to tell me that setting up an Erasmus program with say a university in Austria or Switzerland, even Switzerland, who's not part of the EU, they're still part of a lot of these sort of institutions and things, or France or wherever, would be a really quick process. I mean, he maybe exaggerated a
Hmm.
little bit, but he basically said an overnight process. But
Wow.
trying to set up something with Japan or the
Hmm.
States was a lot harder. And I do remember there was a case when I was trying to go through, because I ended up doing Erasmus in Germany, but I know other people from my cohort went to America. And with one of the
Ah.
universities in particular, the Scottish University were going to send over, I can't remember, say X number of students were picked. They went through an interview process and they were going to go off to America for the year. The American
Hmm.
university replied and went, no, the allocation is for X minus one students.
Oh wow.
And Edinburgh, like, the university I went to, were like, okay, well, let's do it this way. This year we'll send X, and next year we'll send X minus 2. So it balances out to X minus 1 across
Ah.
2 years. And the American university were like, nope, that's not the deal. So the
Oh.
red tape, there was like no leeway in terms of
Typical.
like,
That's what
yeah.
I'd expect out of Japan. Japan is very bureaucratic in that way. It's like, no,
um,
no, we're not gonna bend rules. I don't think so. It says it right here.
yeah. And it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, when I turned up to Germany, yeah, obviously with the university, I had to matriculate and all that sort of stuff, and I had to go to the town hall of where I was staying, and um, I had to sign up and tell them that I was going to be staying there for a year, but that's it. There was like no other red tape I had to go through.
Wow.
Whereas, yeah, I mean, the people who all went over to the States had to immediately start paying, I think at least £1,000 up front for medical insurance and good knows what else, right? So, yeah,
Yeah.
these Erasmus schemes really enhance the ability for students to go on these exchanges. So then you've got then
Mm.
not just the rich kids who can afford it, you've got
Hmm.
then a lot of people, and it's almost expected that you go on one. There are a lot of people who don't, but it's a
Hmm.
very common thing to people to do. That they'll
That's
spend
great.
1 year of their degree program and they'll go off to another country to
That's
do.
really cool.
Yeah. Um, so, very fortunately, at this time, the UK was still inside the European Union, so it was still under the Erasmus scheme. My wife and I met through Erasmus, and so then she had to come back to Spain to finish her degree, and we
Hmm.
basically had a distance relationship for 6 years. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, we were
Good for you.
bouncing back and forth between Scotland and Spain whenever he could. And even when I
Oh.
got like the opportunity to stay in the UK and do a doctoral program, we still kept doing it. And basically, as my doctoral program finished, the way it works in the UK for scientific doctoral studies, I won't say the exact science, but in order to
Hmm.
do, for a lot of scientific doctoral studies, you have an allocation, like you get a stipend, but you only get that
Hmm.
stipend. Normally, it depends on how you're funded. But for me, I only got the
Hmm.
stipend for the 3 years that I was doing actual research. And then
Oh,
the
okay.
last year, when I was writing up my thesis, I didn't get any funding.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so I did the 3 years doing the research. And then when it came to the point of then um, writing up the thesis, my tutor who knew, my wife and my situation in terms of the distance, she was like, just go. Just go to Spain. It's fine. We'll find a way. Well, this was when Skype was still a thing, right? Zoom hadn't blown up because it wasn't pandemic
Right.
yet. She was like, "We'll
Yep.
Skype. It's fine. Just go." And I was like, "Well, I don't really want to stay in, where I was and losing money, and then
Right.
I was alone at that point. So I was like, right, let's go. So moved over to here. And obviously, all my friends and family back home were like, "Oh, when are you going to come back?" I was like, "Well, I'll be writing the thesis for about 6 months." So this was October 2019, more or less.
Oh.
So I was like, "Yeah, it'll be about 6 months. I'll come back for Christmas, and then around Easter time, I'll come back and do like the exam to defend the thesis." Yep, we all know
Hmm.
how that ended up. The world went into lockdown, and when the pandemic was starting to take off,
Mm.
um, I was like, well, it, what's the there's no necessity for me to go back.
Hmm.
So, and in hindsight, it was quite a good thing because we don't have to talk very much about COVID, but a lot of people understand this, that you had to end up being bubbled with certain
Mm.
family members or whatever, and in particular
Hmm.
with me, I didn't want to bring COVID to the doorstep of these people. Um,
Right.
and I was just like, they were in a location that was very safe from COVID, relatively speaking.
Mm.
And it's like,
Hmm.
well, why on earth would I risk going across and picking up this disease? That, because obviously the way COVID spread across Europe is it went Italy
Hmm.
first and then Spain.
Hmm.
And then the
Hmm.
UK went afterwards. I'm like, well, I'm not risking going over there, then may potentially picking up COVID and bring it to their doorstep, and then we didn't know how long it was. Obviously, at that point, we're all kind of still in denial, going, "Oh yeah, by the time it'll be June, it'll be all over." Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But the way it panned out, and this is kind of the sort of culture shock thing, then seeing my country from a different perspective. I experienced COVID in Spain, not
Hmm.
the UK, and I was able to,
Hmm.
being an English speaker, I was able to examine the way the UK was doing things. I'm like, I'm really happy I'm here.
Yeah.
And even though Spanish people, a lot of Spanish people complain about the way that Spain handled the pandemic, I was so
Hmm.
thankful I was in Spain.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
even like small
I
things.
had a
Yeah,
not I had already moved back to the States, and that was one of the moments where I was like, I was in Japan for this.
yeah, they would be so
And
on
again,
it.
it's the same thing, right? People who are in Japan would be like, "Oh, it was terrible. We had all these issues," and I was just like, "Not as bad as I had it in the States."
Yeah, you have no idea, people. That's the thing, because obviously over
Yeah.
there, people wear masks kind of as a very familiar thing, right?
Yeah, yeah, they wear them all the time. I had kids in my classes wear masks. Just they have a cold, so they throw one on.
Mm, yeah,
And I mean, it's a little bit. There are some kids who use them to be like, okay, well, I like having part of my face hidden, right? And so there's
fashion
a little bit
statement,
of that. Yeah, well, yeah, fashion statement, that sort of thing.
and also personality. Sure, sure, sure. Yeah.
You feel uncomfortable in certain social situations. It can help, right?
Hmm.
But just in general, the fact that they're accepted as part of it's like this is what you do when you're feeling sick. It's like a way of being respectful
Yeah,
and demonstrating that you care about other people. Like, and I remember because it didn't blow up into a gigantic pandemic the way that we saw with COVID. But when I was in Japan, we had H1N1
mm,
swine flu
yep.
outbreak,
Hmm.
and so that was a big deal for a while. And so we had hand sanitizer out in all the schools, and you had to use it. And I remember going into that. Actually, this is kind of an interesting angle to take it on culture shock because I remember going into it thinking, okay, like I'm an American. We basically just ignore this stuff. So I'm not gonna put on a mask. I'm not gonna sanitize my hands. Do waste my time with this. And in seeing the way that society shifted around me to help keep people safe and help prevent the spread of disease, I was very quickly like, what am I thinking? This is the wrong approach.
Hmm.
It's just respectful to take these precautions. They hurt me very little and they could save a lot of lives.
Yep.
So I just need to get on this train. And so I started using the hand sanitizer all the time, got myself some masks, and it was fine.
Yep.
So it was another it was like, okay, and this gets actually to something that I had in my notes where it's like there are some experiences where you experience the other culture and you're like, okay, I think I can see the point of this. And then
Yep.
there are other times when you experience the other culture and you're like, no, no, like I think I'm going to stick with what I'm doing.
Hmm.
And to maybe use like a less charged example, I discovered when I was first, this was before I actually moved to Japan, I was just studying abroad and I had like a lesson. It was another sort of quick course on like this is what you can expect when you're living in Japan and what culture shock is like. And this particular presentation was not quite as helpful as the one I got on the JET program, but one aspect of it that I think was very helpful was I remember being told like, okay, in Japan, when you go to a store, the people who work there are there to serve you. So you don't thank them. Like you complete a transaction at the cash register, whatever given like store you're at,
Hmm.
and then you just go. Like you're like, okay. And you just walk out the store and you don't acknowledge that the other person is like has done work for you because that's their job, right? They're getting paid to be polite to you. You're the person in the position of authority, so you can just leave and it's fine. And so the first reaction I had to that was like, oh, that's what they do in Japan. That's what I should be doing. So I did that. And I did it maybe twice. And ultimately, I was just like, you know what? I'm just not comfortable with this. I'm just not
Hmm.
comfortable with the idea of someone being very polite to me because the people who are on the like providing the service in this scenario are famously very polite. And yeah, it's all a script, but it's still like, as far as my experience of it, they're being very polite to me and very helpful oftentimes. And I'm just like, I can't be on the receiving end of all this, thoughtfulness and politeness and just walk out the store like it's my due. Like that feels very wrong to me.
Hmm.
So I'm going to go back to the what I'm used to in the States and just thank people. And so I made it a point whenever I went anywhere shopping and did anything like that in Japan of thanking the wait staff, even if people thought it was weird, because I was like, no, I want to show these people appreciation.
And did you get weird looks from them for it?
Occasionally, yes. Not always, but it was one of those things because they clearly weren't expecting it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just felt like I don't care if this is weird. Like there are some things where it's like, okay, I don't care if this is weird. I'm gonna go along with this way because it's just how I'm more comfortable and people will accept it.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
We have a
yeah,
thing.
was
I don't know if in the States you do this. It's a thing that's quite typical in the UK, especially. I mean, we do it with shop assistants as well, but in particular, if you get off a bus and the exit
mhm,
to the bus is right beside the bus driver, you say thank
mhm.
you.
Oh yeah, I've never been on the bus in the States really, so I don't know. But in Japan, it was the same thing. You always get off by the bus driver. I always say thank you. That was another situation where it was like, yeah, this guy was very helpful,
Mhm.
and like I could not have gotten where I was going without the bus driver. So I thanked them. This, again, not the done thing. People
Mm.
just get off in utter silence.
Yeah. Yeah. I think here in Spain, it's kind of interesting. That's one of the shocks for me. A lot depends on the person, but
Hmm.
here, please and thank you are words which are not as widely used.
Hmm.
It's kind of interesting to me. Um, People will use it, but it's not that common. You're more
Hmm.
likely to use other phrases. Like if for example, if you've had an interaction with like a shop assistant or something, and they have generally been very helpful to you, instead of
Hmm.
saying thank you, you'd say an expression which is muy amable, which is like very kind.
Hmm.
And that's that, and that's really hard for me to get into my brain because, like, when I don't know what it's like in the States, but in the UK, it was really drilled into me.
Hmm.
Especially my parents being slightly of an older generation that were like, remember your P's and Q's. You have to say please and
Hmm.
thank you every single time. Um,
Hmm.
Whereas I think here it's not done so much. And
Interesting.
it does catch me off guard a little bit. But a lot depends on the person. I have then through interactions with people who I've seen, I'm like, oh, okay. But then I've asked other people, and they're like, oh, no, no, I say please and thank you every time. I'm like, oh, okay. So it seems to be quite a personal thing, I think. But
Hmm.
in general, I would say the vast majority don't use please and thank you as much
Interesting.
as we would in, and in the
Is
extent
it
of
is
in
it
the UK, if you
common?
don't use please, people will look at you like, why are you being rude to me?
Yeah. Interesting.
I
Is
don't
it
know.
common to like is it unusual to use the like alternative phrase or is it common to just not say anything?
No, you normally have to say you. Ah. This
Because
is
I'm
really
thinking
difficult. It's really difficult to answer because the problem is I've experienced a lot of Spanish culture through my
mm,
wife's eyes. Because like
hmm
when I first came over here, I realized we didn't quite finish the story, but the base of the story was pandemic happened, and because I couldn't go back to the UK very easily, I had to find a job here. I've been here ever since. That's basically the story. But because I always had to experience it through her eyes. At the beginning of our relationship, when I used to come over to visit, obviously
hmm
I couldn't speak any Spanish, so any sort of interaction had to be done through her. And then
hmm
when I then now interact on my own with people, I imitate her behavior. And very fortunately,
Ah,
and
yeah.
she probably won't be listening to this. She doesn't watch my videos, but she's a very
Mm-hmm.
like kind and polite and respectful person. So,
Mm-hmm.
she will generally interact very well with people. So
Okay.
I've seen it through her eyes, but that might not be the stereotypical way of doing something. So
I
the
see.
expression I gave, like muy amable, I use it a lot, but that's because she uses
Hmm
it a lot. That's her
I
go-to,
see.
like, you've been a really kind person, thank you for helping me phrase. So I
Okay.
use it a lot. Um, and same, like, when you leave shops, it's like a very common thing here to say an expression which is que vaya bien, or in Catalan, que vagi bé, which is basically like, I hope everything goes well in your life, which is kind of a profound thing to
Ah.
say, but I say it a
Yeah.
lot.
Okay.
Again, that's kind of the thing you say when you're leaving. Instead of saying a thank you, you'd be
Mm.
like goodbye, and then you say this expression. That also
Mm.
catches off people off guard too.
Sort of like have a nice day.
Yeah, that's like the
Way more
easiest way.
extreme.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
more
way more
extreme.
extreme. But
Uh,
yeah.
I don't know how you found it. I remember when I was reading your blog,
Mm.
and I need to go through and read the rest. But I do remember there was one blog post that you put. I can't remember what day it was, but there was a
Hmm
particular moment when you had to call like a hotel owner or the owner of an inn
Oh
or
yeah.
something, and it was the way you wrote it. I found it really funny, and I did resonate with this quite a bit in a slightly different way. That you spoke obviously with your Japanese level, which is very fluent and very proficient. Obviously, this is
Well, it was back then. It's been
um
10 years.
you're still doing it as your job though, so you can't be that
Well,
bad.
I translate the written works as my job. I feel like my spoken Japanese has declined.
Ah, right, okay, yeah, you got a lot more time to think when you've got written or um,
Yeah,
language in front of you. But then is the fact
yeah,
then when the hotelier came down, he was looking for this Japanese guy, and then you were just standing there
yeah.
like, yes, it was me.
That's
Did
right.
you,
Yeah.
like talk to me about that? I'm kind of interested because I've got similar stories too, but again in a very different way. But like, how did you find people? Like, how did they interact with you in terms of then when they suddenly realize, oh my goodness, you do actually speak Japanese, and then this, did they alter their behavior? The way they spoke to you, then they suddenly realize, oh right, you understand them, you can talk to them, rather than being, oh god, here's this foreigner, oh we're gonna have to speak very slowly, or maybe change into English or whatever.
It would depend on the situation. So there was one person who I remember in particular. And by the way, if people aren't sure what Scott Sword means with my blog, this is something that so I think I mentioned in my quick summary of what I was doing in Japan. At the end of that experience, I did this walk across the country, where I walked from the northernmost point all the way down to I think it was the westernmost point, which is you'd expect it to be north-south, but uh, Japan sort of runs at an incline. So basically, I walked from one end of the country to the other, um, and I decided to write about that experience while I was sort of sorting through my different photos that I took on the trip that all got messed up because the time codes all changed when I moved back to the States. And I had to coordinate between two different cameras. It was a gigantic mess. And I was like, I can use this as an excuse because I just happened to notice on the like 10-year anniversary that this had happened. I can use this as an excuse, I thought, to just write up each day as I was like 10 years later, what I was doing on the day when I was walking in Japan. So that's what my blog is. I also post like my translation born videos on there, and I do like D&D recaps and things for my other group. Like a lot of the stuff on that blog is just basically for my personal use, putting up on the internet. But this specific thing is like how I walked across Japan. So that's what that is. And to get back to the question, I remember like one particular person who was just like, "Oh, it's such a relief that you can speak Japanese. Like you are the second best Japanese speaker I've ever interacted with who's a foreigner. The only person who's better than you is this guy who came and worked as a short order cook for a while." Uh, and it's like the last foreigners that came through here had no idea. We had to like go consult a dictionary every time anyone wanted to communicate anything. It was a complete nightmare. Thank goodness you're here. And most people, it didn't change their take too much. It changed it a little, but it wasn't too much. So to give like a sort of contrasting example, there's this one woman who I remember for a very different reason. So much later on in this same walk across Japan, I stopped into this tiny restaurant for lunch, and I walked in the door, and the woman just looked at me because again, visible minority, and I don't remember if her mouth actually dropped or not, but I just got that impression that I had shocked her. And
Mhm.
she said, "But what can you eat?" Because part of her image of she probably had me pegged as an American because that's the stereotype,
Mhm.
um, that Americans who like wander into Japanese places don't just eat Japanese food. They find it weird and strange.
Mm.
And if they do eat any food, they eat a lot of it, and Japanese portions tend to be smaller. And they don't know anything about Japanese, and so they're sort of bumbling, right? And so just this immediate, I could see her like working through all these immediate stereotypes. And I was then able to be like, "Oh, don't worry, I can eat anything." And I think the fact that I spoke Japanese immediately helped to like calm her down, realize this isn't one of those people who doesn't know anything and is just in
Mm.
here that is going to force me to try and like interact through some sort of dictionary, put me completely out of my depth.
Mhm.
And so she was then willing to sort of venture. She was like, okay, well, we have a fish special and we have a beef special. And I deliberately chose the beef special because that's another thing. I was like, okay, Americans like beef. It's going to calm her down if I choose the beef special. And I could see it happen. She was like, "Oh, thank goodness." Like she didn't actually say it, but I could see in her body language that that was what she was experiencing. She was like, "Okay, he
He's
went
fit.
with the stereotypical American choice. This is gonna work."
You had to reassure her. It's like, yes, I am an American.
That's right. I will fit into the script. Uh,
Wow.
and so yeah, and then I sat down and I had a lovely dinner. And by the time I got to the end of that experience, she was telling me all about the local sites and like, oh, you
Oh.
have to go through. This is like a portion of this walking trail that people have been traveling for thousands of years. You have to go see it. Like, and it sort of ended up it wasn't just one thing, right? It wasn't just the language, it was the language and then the choice of food and then seeing me actually eat all the food and then me saying like, oh, that was great, and getting to talk about like, what am I even doing here in this tiny little lunch place sort of in the middle of nowhere just outside Osaka. It's like, okay, by the time I got to the end of it, right, I had sort of been able to bridge that gap, but
Hmm.
it was a lot of active work
Sure.
to make that happen.
Need a lot of convincing. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And then
yeah.
I had other people who to go. So I sort of did the most positive at first, where they were just immediately like, "Oh, thank goodness," and another one where it was like, "Okay, I'm gonna like eventually get through to you." I also had the experience where I called up a place on the phone, and I think my Japanese sort of gave me a little bit of cover that I otherwise wouldn't have had, because I got all the way to the point of making a reservation at this one Japanese style inn, and got basically to the end of the conversation, and I was just waiting for like him to ask me, or him to give me the price or something like that.
Hmm.
uh, and the guy on the other end of the phone realized that I didn't know the phone conversation was supposed to be over,
All
and so
right.
he asked me where I was from, and at that point I was like, oh, okay, well, today I'm walking from here, but originally I'm from the States. And at that point he was like, oh, you can't come here, go stay at the business hotel.
Oh,
This
what?
place, yeah. And I was like, what? What do you mean I can't come there? Like, this was a done deal. He's like, no, 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 no. There's tatami mats all through this place. It'll be really uncomfortable. Like, please don't come here. And I tried to back this guy into as much of a corner as I could, uh, because I could see no legitimate reason for him to basically agree to let me stay there and then suddenly not be able to. And
Turning business
so
away. This is not how you do business, people. You don't turn away business.
true. But yeah, I think this was someone who just had a very strong anti-foreign sentiment. My presumption, because I basically got it to the point where I was like, listen, I'm fine with tatami. I've done it before. I've stayed in Japanese inns before. You can hear I can speak the language. I'm walking to your hotel. I'm walking the length of your country. Like, can I not stay at your inn? He was just like, please go stay at the business hotel. And that was the end of the conversation. So
Wow.
that was my most uncomfortable experience probably on that entire hike, was dealing with this person who clearly just did not want anything to do with foreigners.
Goodness me. And you went to the business hotel, I guess, in the end. You had no choice.
I went to the business hotel. Yeah, I wasn't. I thought about showing up. I was mad in the moment. I was
Yeah.
mad and I was discouraged.
Yeah.
But I got there and I was like, bad
how
idea.
how far into the hike was this? Probably about halfway. Don't piss off a guy who's been hiking for days and days and days for your country.
Yeah,
your
yeah.
your
It was
tether is very short at that point.
way more than halfway. Yeah,
Goodness.
I was in the best shape of my life if I wanted to cause trouble. But I'm not that sort of person.
Hmm. I have it because I think I mentioned it. The region I'm living in is Catalonia, and obviously then that brings in its own challenges being a bilingual region.
Yeah.
So the thing that normally makes people's jaws drop is when I walk into shops and I have this really like awkward like conversation in Spanish. Depends what happens. I'm one of these people. I don't know if you did it in Japan, but if I know I have to go into a shop or something and I
Mhm.
need a very specific conversation, I will look up specific vocabulary in advance just to make sure I do not make an absolute tit of myself in the
Oh, yeah.
in the shop. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Spontaneous
Yeah.
conversations are not my thing, and sometimes if I'm in a bad mood, Spanish does not flow out of my brain or my mouth very well. But
Mm.
so I often walk in and they'll clearly tell, oh right, okay, he's a foreigner or whatever. Um, and then the minute I leave, I then suddenly switch into Catalan because I do all the greetings in Catalan. So they've had this
Hmm.
really awkward, like, broken Spanish conversation with me, and then I'm leaving, I'm like, Adeo, Kamachi Bay. And they're just like, what? What is this?
That's great.
Um, but I've had like reactions like from even from like work colleagues when I've done that. They look at me like really weirdly and like,
Hmm.
"How do you know Kabaji Bay?" I'm like, "I've been living here for like at this point when this conversation happened. I remember in particular, I was like, I've been living here 3 years. Like, I know I'm a Brit and I know we have this bad reputation for learning languages, but I am a sponge. I absorb information. If people around me are
Yeah.
speaking, I will notice and I will pick up phrases that they say." Um, it's a problem. It's a stereotype I have to try and fight sometimes. Where
Mm.
it's a bit unfortunate. I mean, again, I'm stereotyping a bit, but a lot of people in my country, because we come from this a monolingual society, and maybe it's the same in the
Hmm.
states, where it's like also English is like this dominant like world language. We kind of
Yeah.
got this attitude like, everyone can speak English to us. We don't need to speak your language. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. That attitude is prevalent at the States as well.
but I just cannot. I cannot function under that sort of attitude.
Hmm.
Um, it's just you can't walk into places and just assume that they can speak English. If you're
Hmm.
in like the tourist of touristy areas, then I'm like, okay, fair enough. But
Hmm.
if as soon as you go off like you did, like going through, all along this whole hike through Japan, same with me, yeah, I live in a fairly like large settlement, but
Hmm.
there are a lot of people here who do not speak English.
Yeah.
And you go, and we always talk about the joke like the real Spain. The minute you go off into like all these little
Mm.
villages and things,
Hmm.
you cannot go around with that assumption.
Hmm.
And it's just, yeah, it's one of those things where I have to try and fight against that a little bit. Where I'm kind of like, yeah, I know I'm a Brit, yeah, I know I'm an English speaker, but I am really trying. And to be fair, I've had mostly like really good interactions with people where they've actually said to me, especially if it's like a very quick conversation, no. But if I've had like longer, I remember one in particular. I made it as a joke when I had to go and buy my wife the engagement ring. My
Hmm.
excuse for delaying the engagement as long as I did was I have to get my Spanish better because I'm gonna have to negotiate with these people.
Ah.
um, but obviously, then the place I ended up going to buy the ring, I actually had like I spent quite a lot of time there. We had like really nice conversation. The guy was just like, "Oh, your Spanish is quite good." And I was like, "Oh yeah, you feel like $1 million when that happens."
Nice.
But then that's always then counteracted by all those moments where you get everything wrong. You're like, "Oh my god, I'm embarrassing myself in front of these people," and they think it now this is like the stereotype of British people. This is really awkward. So yeah, it's really hard being like a
Yeah.
representative for your country.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think that's a good point, especially with the whole representative thing, because you don't necessarily ask for it, but that's what you are.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Like I deliberately remember like there were definitely moments like when I set out on my hike when I was like gonna walk across Japan, I was like, I want to try and make it so that whoever interacts with me as much as possible comes away with a more positive experience than they expected, right? I want to be sort of a good ambassador for how foreigners can behave in Japanese society
yeah,
because I feel like they get a lot of experiences that are not quite so positive,
sure,
particularly in like big tourist places,
yeah,
because they do get exposed to the more prevalent attitude of just like, oh, everyone's going to speak English to me here, right? I'm going to like impose the values of my own culture, even though I'm in this other, foreign country.
mm,
And so, as much as possible, I was like, I want to like get around in Japanese society and try and behave as seamlessly in it as possible and hopefully like do my little bit to give some people positive experiences interacting with someone from the US.
yeah, and something that I try to do the same as well. Um,
Yeah.
I think is, I mean, if you look at like what you did in terms of trekking across Japan, that is not a normal thing for like a classic, more close-minded foreign visitor to do, right? So,
Yeah, very true.
immediately
Depending
then
on
that
where you
that
are
sets you
though,
apart.
right?
Yeah, sure.
Depending on where you are though, they won't, no one's going to know that, and depending on where you are, that's you're just another tourist until you open your mouth and realize you can actually speak Japanese, but
Yeah, and then the shock. So yeah, I when you're talking about reverse culture shocks, I've noticed it
yes.
too in terms of language. Uh,
Mm.
I end up saying like what we call Spanglish things. There are certain
Ah.
ways of like intonation or certain set phrases.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm trying to think of anything in particular. Oh, the one, right? Okay, right. Okay, yeah. So a thing that Spanish people do, or at least people from Catalonia do, is they tut quite a lot, but they don't tut in like a disapproving way. It's not like a British tut. British
Ah.
people tut. I don't know if Americans do this, but we tut when we're annoyed with people.
Mm-hmm.
Like if someone jumps, this is a very British thing. If someone jumps you in the queue at the supermarket, like, oh, look at that kind of thing. That's a
Mm-hmm.
very British reaction. Whereas Spanish, or I'll say Catalan people, 'cause I don't know if it's the rest in Spain. In Spain is the same, but Catalan people will tut to basically show a disagreement with something, or if
Mm.
you make a statement that is negative, not negative, but like, um, if I ask you, if I say something like really basic to you, like, "Oh, you don't like chocolate ice cream, do you?" and your answer is "No, I don't like chocolate ice cream," you'll tut in reply.
Ah. Okay.
Um, or if I ask you like a general question, like, are you ready? No. They'll tut like that. As a British
Ah.
person, when I first started interacting with people, I thought it was like really disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like the same, like, I'm having to deal with, teenage students. I
Mm.
thought that was them trying to like be disrespectful to me. Um,
Yeah.
but then I caught myself very recently in English when we went back recently for a trip to Scotland. I caught
Mm-hmm.
myself tutting. I was like, oh my god, I've become what I hate. I've become that thing, and now all my friends are going to judge me because I'm tutting in a really weird way. Um, I've ended up
Yeah. The
cat
thing.
cat. Oh, you go. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say the thing that got me the most like you're being rude like reactions and stares and things was I got so used to like when you have soup of any kind in Japan,
Ah.
you are totally free to take the bowl and bring it up to your mouth and drink straight from the bowl,
Mhm.
as opposed to getting it all with a spoon every time.
Right.
And I was just like, this is a better way of doing things.
Yeah.
And so
It's very
I
efficient.
came back. Everyone was like, "What are you doing?" Like my parents even were just totally shocked that I would be like drinking soup straight from the bowl.
Yeah.
And I was like, "No, this is normal. This is the best way to do it." And then the other thing to on top of that is this isn't just soup, but it's also like ramen noodles. Is
Uh-huh.
you're supposed to slurp them up
Yeah.
as a sign of appreciation for the chef and the meal.
Mhm.
And so I got totally used to slurping. This actually surprised a lot of Japanese people because a lot of foreigners have a hard time slurping up noodles. So I could do it no problem. They were like, "Oh, this is great! You're a foreigner who slurps their noodles." And I got home and I slurped my noodles, and I did not get that reaction.
No. Everyone staring dagger eyes at you across the restaurant, like, look at this guy.
It's like, who is this absolute bore? What's going on?
Did did his parents not teach him any manners at all? They should be ashamed of
That's right.
themselves. Disowned him instantly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the same with me, like people who slurp coffee and tea.
Yeah,
I'm just like, oh, can you stop? But then sometimes I do it. I'm just like, oh my god, I gotta stop this. It's yeah, yeah, yeah. Again, it's not maybe a
they've
Spanish trait to
actually
do it, but yeah.
they've actually found that like it makes you appreciate the flavor more. Like soups
Really?
and teas and coffees and things, you get a
Huh?
little bit more air in your mouth, and so like you're better able to taste it.
Really? Huh?
Yeah, I watched a video. There was a while where there was this YouTube series where they had like people who were professionals in some aspect of the food industry try and blindly taste different like substances. So sometimes it was like ice cream, sometimes it was some different types of like cured meats, sometimes it was like tea or coffee, right? And they would have to identify the price points. And so they had this one guy on for identifying teas, and he was like, these two are really hard to like differentiate between, so I'm going to take a special like tea sipping spoon and slurp really loudly, and that's going to give me a better sense. And he was like, after he did that, immediately able to distinguish between the two and like come up with a price
Wow.
differentiator. And I was just like, oh, that's astonishing.
I don't know. See,
But
so I had an experience like that in some people listening might know this in the Asturias region of Spain. they've got a tradition. I
Hmm.
don't know if it's in just Oviedo or in others. I was very fortunate to go to Oviedo for a conference a while back, and we went out and checked the local gastronomy and all that stuff. And the thing that region of Spain is really famous for cider. And the thing they do is when you go out,
Ah.
I don't know if they do it in the homes as well. I guess they do it in the homes as well. But when you go out to restaurants to drink cider, um, they don't you don't pour you don't put the glass on the table and just pour the cider from the bottle immediately into the
Hmm.
glass. They hold the bottle up incredibly high, like literally at arm's length above their head, and they hold then the glass as close to the ground as possible, and they pour it
Oh,
that way.
wow.
And the whole thing that I heard was, oh yeah, because more oxygen gets or more air gets into it, and the way it hits off the bottom, obviously it's falling quite a speed when it hits the bottom of the glass, because they tilt the glass as well, so it falls at an angle rather than hitting the bottom of the glass directly. It hits the side first,
Ah.
then bounces on the bottom. And yeah, it's like it opens up and more air gets, and I was like, oh, does it really? Like, being very skeptical. But that's now you saying it about the tea and soups and things. Then maybe there is some, legitimacy to it then.
Yeah, maybe. That's interesting. That's wild. What a what an experience that would be. I'd be terrified.
I'll have to when this is done. I'll send a video link to you. You can see it
Cool.
in action. It's very good. Um,
Yeah.
I'm looking at the Stardew footage. We've got about 15 minutes, so
Hmm.
I don't think we've barely scratched the surface of things that we wanted to speak about. I feel like there's a lot more in the
Oh,
bank. Is
agreed. Yeah.
anything in particular that you've got from your list that you really want to
Well,
re dive into
let
for
me
15 minutes?
because it's sort of a good sort of transition, I think, from what you were just telling me. Why don't I ask you about like what's the local food culture like in Spain compared to in the UK?
Hmm. Um, in especially I mean I think in the whole of Europe, UK has a very bad reputation for food,
Hmm.
which is a real shame because there is some very good food in the UK. The thing is, obviously, climate does not really permit certain produce to be produced in the UK.
Hmm.
So if you go into UK supermarkets, the vast majority of fresh fruit and veg will actually be from places like Spain or the Netherlands.
Okay.
Um, Britain is good at producing ground-based vegetables, so a lot of potatoes, obviously, carrots,
Mm-hmm.
swedes, these sort of things, peas, and there is an asparagus season, but it's very short. Um, there is cider, so apples and pears, because they are a little bit more hardy. But the minute any sort of like citrus-based stuff, nah, forget it. It's just not going to happen. So I noticed that the minute I arrived here, you're suddenly exposed to a lot more local fresh produce.
Okay.
um, I think it's also I think because of the UK, I mean, like a lot of countries, a lot of the produce is very centralized. It all goes into these huge supermarkets. A lot of the
Mm-hmm.
independent green grocers and other, fishmongers and butcher stuff have gone away over time,
Mm-hmm.
and now they're trying to get them back. But once they're gone, it's very hard to get them back again. Whereas
Yeah.
here, there is still quite a lot of focus on local produce, or even if you go into a big supermarket, you know that the produce is all from the country. Most things are from, especially if it's like fresh fruit and veg and stuff. A lot of it will be from the country.
Mm-hmm.
And the area that I'm in particular, there is a lot of agricultural produce. Is what it's famous for. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so much so that I meet people from lots of the little outlying villages, and they will argue about which village produces the best oil and the best peaches and the best. You're just like, are you shitting me? Like, you're all from the same like little region. Can you just stop? And like, no, 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 my village is better than yours. And it's just like, good grief. But it's a real blessing actually. And I say this joke all the time that
Yeah.
the Spaniards keep all the good produce for themselves and they send all the shit ones over to Scotland. But like I was shocked, like walking into like what I was considered a basic supermarket. We're not going like high
Mm-hmm.
end here, like a very basic supermarket, and
Mm-hmm.
the peppers, like what you would call I think bell peppers, were just
Yeah.
enormous, and the variety of tomatoes was just blowing my mind.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, there is still very much, a focus here on home cooked food. Like a lot of
Mm.
countries, again, I need to be very careful how I phrase this. I don't want people to think that I'm suddenly being sexist. Like, I'm really happy that women are not stuck in the kitchens all day and they've got careers and their own ambitions. I'm really happy about that. But obviously, because of that societal change, there isn't as much home cooked food as there used to be.
Hmm.
And they always say grandma cooks the best. That's always the way.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see. But something I really noticed was like the amount of ultra processed food is
Hmm.
so much lower than in the UK, and I was
Yeah.
just so happy about it. I was just like,
Hmm.
I thank, and when I go back to Scotland now, it's like, good grief, can I just find like anything that is fresh? It's very difficult. And like, I think this is not a whole Spain thing, but this is very much a Catalan thing. They will,
Mm.
at lunchtime, there will be a salad in the middle of the table that everybody
Hmm.
shares. And it's not like in the UK, we're often like, okay, you dish out a portion for everybody. No, there's this huge salad in the middle, and there's no protocol about you. Oh, you have to take the spoon and spoon some of it onto your plate. Nah. You just go in with your fork and you just take everything. You take whatever you want, and you're all fighting over the last olive or whatever. It's absolutely
Nice.
fine. So yeah, and even there are a lot of people who maybe don't cook, but instead of going to the supermarket and buying like very high processed, what UK people would do, like a really high processed lasagna or curry or whatever, they go to like these shops. Like they're not restaurants, they're not even like takeaway. It's really hard to explain what they are. They're like, I guess, like a
Hmm.
deli shops. Like the easy thing to explain, where there's one
Okay.
very close to where I live where they just do rotisserie chicken. There we go, get the word out.
Mm.
And they literally, like, every Saturday they cook like, I assume, like hundreds of these rotisserie chickens. They put them into portions, and people come along and they take them away, and they go home and have lunch
Wow.
with it. So even though they're having a pre-cooked lunch, it's being cooked
Hmm.
by, it's being cooked that day, rather than being
Hmm.
having that was processed and then it's been sitting on the supermarket shelf for a week or whatever. So there is this slightly different culture in terms of food, which is great.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
every
There's a
even in Catalonia, there's like lots of like little dishes which are very much like, this is from this region, this is from this region, and it's great. It's absolutely great.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was hoping you would say. There are a lot of parallels with what I experienced when I went to Japan,
Hmm.
because that's one of the things that snuck up on me was I did not appreciate the impact that eating food in Japan would have on me. Especially because like at first, like I didn't know how to cook. I was just out of college. I never needed to know how to cook. So when I went to Japan, I just, stuck to processed foods. And you know, I got by, but that was not typical for the country. And like the more time I spent there, the more I learned to like actually cook for myself, and the more I got to experience the local food culture, and I realized it's just so much richer than what I experienced back home. Like not even close. The fact that basically everywhere you go, right? It sounds like very similar to in Spain. Everywhere I would go in Japan had their own best food,
Hmm.
right? And it would be prominent. Right? I'd be like, okay, so if I'm going to this region, they will like advertise to you, okay, this is our dish, right? So hachinohe, I wrote this down here. Um, Here we go. So first of all, the region of Aomori, Aomori Prefecture, is where Hachinohe, the city, is in, and that whole region is famous for its apples, and they make the best apple juice I have ever tasted in my entire life. And I don't know how they do it, but it's totally fresh, like very like carefully processed,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not concentrated. And they like there's a big summer festival, uh, and around the harvest season, like whenever it's fresh, you can get these gigantic bottles of it, and they haven't been like they're not made from concentrate. They're just incredible. And I was just like, I never knew apple juice could taste like this.
Mm-hmm.
Completely changed my experience of that. And
Yeah.
then Hachinohe, the city, is famous for its squid. They get a bunch of squid in of like it's one of the biggest places where they fish squid in the country, and so they're also famous for like dried squid legs and like the cut up squid sacks, and they can use the squid ink and put it in cookies, and like these are all just like local Hachinohe specialties that they will sell as souvenirs. Because people will go on like when people in Japan go on like business trips or vacations and things, they'll buy these. They call them omiyage. So they're sort of like souvenirs, except you're just expected to do this. And so there are shops that are built around the idea that you're going to be looking for these souvenirs, which are like little individual prepackaged foods that you can pass out to everybody who works in the same office as you when you come back home. And
Oh,
they're all focused on like local specialties.
oh, that's
So
lovely.
yeah, and it's really it just blew my mind, just the extent to which is like, okay, and this is all the fresh stuff. These are all like the different cookies. These are all this other category, like vegetables don't make very good omiyage, but there are definitely like places that are known for their vegetables. Another big like Hachinohe specialty is senbei jiru, which senbei is normally like a rice cracker, but the local variety, they call it nambu senbei, is a wheat cracker that they use instead of rice.
Mm.
And so they make this cracker out of wheat, and then they put it into a soup. So it's wheat cracker soup, and that's a local specialty that Hachinohe is known for, the city, right? And then you can also get on the higher end of things, you can get what they call ichigo ni, which is sea urchin and abalone, and they cook it up into a soup.
Wow.
And yeah, it's so good. And ichigo is the Japanese word for strawberry. So and ni is like to boil. So it's like boiled strawberry soup. And the idea is, I looked this up, and according to the Hachinohe like tourism website, they say that they call it that because the look of the sea urchin in the soup is said to resemble wild strawberries in the fogs of the
Oh.
countryside.
Oh my goodness, I thought it was
Yeah.
like actually like boiled strawberries. Like, what they do it? Okay, right. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially I guess before going over, your exposure to Japanese food wouldn't have been that great. So you really have to go in with a very open mind and be willing to try a lot of these sort of, delicacies and those regional dishes that really come alive
Yeah.
when you're there.
And just
Um,
the like sometimes because Japanese food like is basically synonymous with sushi, right?
yeah.
And I'd had sushi in the States before and did not like it at all. And so I went to Japan and I was just fully prepared to not like sushi. And then I actually had some sushi in Japan and I realized it makes a really big difference how fresh your fish is.
Hmm.
Because sushi in Japan that is like fresh off the boat is just incomparable. And it's just the sheer amount of seafood that they have ready access to there because the whole country is basically right on the shoreline, right?
Sure.
Um, it's just incomparable. The US being like such a big landmass, you can't like they have to freeze seafood to get it anywhere.
Yep.
Like and I live fairly close to a coast, but even so, uh, they freeze it and you end up losing out on a ton of flavor.
Yep.
And it just completely changed my whole perspective on food and variety and eating and even stuff that I thought I knew. Like it turned out it was different. And like I remember another thing that blew me away was just so in Japan, they say that the staple food is rice. And if you're in Japan, you'll also learn that in the United States, bread is the staple food. But when I was living in Japan, I realized when they said rice was a staple food, they really meant it. Like you have rice with every single meal. You have rice breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Not uncommon at all. And in the States, maybe you have toast with breakfast, maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
Totally normal to go through an entire day and not have any bread. And I realized no, like when they say rice is a staple in Japan, like that means something different to me now that I've lived there. It's completely like part of that culture. It's in every meal.
I've noticed that here where, yeah, in the UK too, we often talk about bread, but like the way we use bread is different to in Spain. In Spain, they like to have bread with the main dish, and they use it almost like an
Mm-hmm.
utensil,
Ah,
and
yeah,
they'll
I've heard
literally
about that.
like literally push the food onto the bread, and they won't just use it just to mop up the sauce afterwards. They'll literally use it
Mm-hmm.
like an utensil. They want to break up the bread and all this sort of stuff, and they won't put it on a separate plate either. It will sit there on top of the tablecloth, and all the breadcrumbs are going everywhere, but they don't care. Um,
Wow.
yeah, it's just the relationship with the food is different.
Yeah.
The thing here is butter is not used very often. Butter is very much like a Northern European thing.
I
Um,
see.
So, in the UK, it's always butter on bread if you're having toast or sandwiches or whatever.
Hmm.
Whereas here, they don't do that. They'll just squeeze, like, they'll take a tomato and literally squeeze all the juice out of the tomato. And
Oh wow.
it has to be a very particular, because I then went back and and wanted with a lot of gusto and enthusiasm, I wanted to show all my Scottish friends this is how Spanish people like have bread.
Hmm.
But the tomatoes were just so like I don't know what not dry. There was no juice inside them. It was the wrong variety, and I just
Ah.
couldn't get it the same. Whereas here, there's a very specific type of tomato, and that's the tomato you use to you just squash it. Like you take it out of the fridge or whatever, and it's basically like falling apart in your hands. It's that soft. You put any sort of pressure on it, it'll split, but you get all this juice out. And you just put that and a little bit of salt or a little bit of olive oil, and that's it. You're done. Um, and even something like the potato omelet, tortilla de patata, is like it's such a humble, like it's just potato and egg.
Hmm.
There's just something very just classic, just so almost comforting about it too. Um, yeah, you
Yeah.
can't compare the stuff. Like I was looking up something while you're trying the jamón ibérico, which is like the Spanish ham.
Hmm.
I've had a little bit of Iberico and Serrano ham in
Hmm.
Scotland, but obviously they send all like the cheap cuts over, and then because it's in a packaging and it's been sent, goodness, how many air miles across, it doesn't.
Hmm.
You think it tastes good, but the minute you come here, I remember the first time I had like proper jamón ibérico. It was at a wedding.
Yep. I think we're in danger of going long, by the way.
I think we are. It's alright. I've looped the footage. It's fine. It'll just keep
Okay,
going.
good.
um, we'll find a natural place and we'll stop. But it was like when I say I was salivating while eating it, is not a lie. It was just like this taste I'd never had before.
Mm.
Um, and just I just wanted to keep going back for more. It was just something
Oh
about
yeah.
it. It was just what I and can't replicate it. It's just yeah, it's
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That sounds exactly like, well, maybe not exactly, but very similar to the experience I had with seafood in Japan.
mm,
Whereas, like, I didn't even think I liked seafood, and then I went to Japan, and it was like, no, this is delicious. I just
yeah,
never knew the the difference. I didn't know what I was missing.
yeah, and that's I think I've noticed when I've gone back. Um, I will then eat all the British classics. I'll have my English breakfast. I'll have
Hmm.
shepherd's pie and all this sort of thing. And I do miss that food.
Mm.
Um, but I'm never disappointed to come back here. As
Yeah.
a
That's
general,
that's
like
another thing. Go ahead.
I was just say, as a general, maybe it's the same with you, Japan. Like the general, even though there are dishes like you probably the same with you, America, right? There are dishes that
Hmm.
you really connect with because it's like a
Hmm.
childhood memory, or it's the food you had as you were growing up, or you
Yeah.
associate it with memories from your home country. But as a day-to-day living experience, I would take Spanish food every single day, and also just the
Hmm.
way they eat, and just the
Hmm.
way. I'm hoping so much it doesn't change. I hope Spain doesn't shift,
Hmm.
because it feels like it's like a generation behind the UK in terms of like the amount of processed food. I really hope it doesn't move in that same direction. I hope it stays where it is right
Yeah.
now. I was so impressed when I came over for the first time.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like to me that I think we've had sort of similar experiences where when I first went to Japan, there were certain foods where it was like as much as amazed as I was by the food culture in Japan and just the like prominence of place that they gave to food and the like importance they placed on freshness, like the general food culture, I'd never experienced anything like it. And but as astounded as I was by all that, there are some dishes where it's just like, no, like this, you're doing it wrong, right? This is what I grew up with. This is like you're not gonna get a good American hamburger in Japan
Sure.
unless you're at like a specialty shop in Tokyo, right? Which in Hachinohe I did not have access to. I actually we were talking about my blog. I sort of found a way to make my own hamburgers to my own specs, but it's not the same when you try and get one from a burger chain. Just completely
Nah.
different experience. And likewise with like pizza or waffles even because
Mm.
waffles and pancakes and things like I grew up with those for breakfast and it's like okay you have the stack or the waffle or whatever you put the maple syrup on that and then you can eat that just like that that's all you need And in Japan, it's like, hey, here's a waffle. We didn't give you any syrup, but we will put some vanilla ice cream on top and some berries. And I'm like, okay, but I want to have maple syrup. And so what I did one time was I actually showed up to a waffle place in Japan with my own bottle of maple syrup that I got from the supermarket. I just like stealth poured the syrup on the waffles because I just wanted to have that taste.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out to be like super embarrassing because the shop owner came over and just like tasted it and was like, I see why this was like an individual like shop. It was a small place, so the owner himself like came out and like tried the American version. It was like, I can see why you would go for this. And I was just sitting there like, I really hoped, because I didn't want to offend the guy. I liked that shop a lot.
Sure.
So I was like, oh, I hope you didn't take this the wrong way. But what that helped me to realize was what I needed to do was like let American food be its own food,
Yeah.
not try and recreate that experience in Japan,
Yeah.
and instead embrace the different weird takes on the familiar stuff that I liked from the States in Japan without trying to like force it into this category that I'd grown up with.
Yeah.
So like just appreciate the vanilla ice cream on a waffle or the mayonnaise on a pizza with like corn scattered all around it, right? Like,
Oh my goodness.
just incomprehensible decisions to me. But you actually try it, and it's not bad. You get used to it and you appreciate it for what it is, as opposed to what you want it to be, and you have a better experience that way.
Yeah. Whereas I do it a slightly different way, where fortunately there are not many British restaurants around here. They don't try and imitate. And even if there were, I wouldn't go to them. For me, it's
Yeah.
like Scottish food and British food is its one thing. If I want to cook it at home, that's my deal. And I've tried. I've tried to cook like British Christmas meals. It doesn't quite turn out the same because you haven't got, So I've noticed here the one food that doesn't work very well here is bacon. The bacon's very different. It doesn't cook the same way. I never get the right texture. I'm like, but
It might be a different cut. It's a different cut in Japan. What they call bacon is not what they call bacon in the States.
no, it's the same with Spain. I think the cut's very different. But I just like, no, Scottish food and British food is its own thing. When I'm here, I'm gonna eat Spanish food, and like around where we live, there's actually quite a lot of Japanese restaurants. It's become a bit of a thing now. There's lots of Japanese restaurants doing ramen. There's a lot of Italian restaurants because Italian is famous everywhere. But the number of times I think my wife's getting a little bit not annoyed with me, but she finds it quite funny when she's like, "Where do you want to go out to eat?" I'm like, "I want to just go out to like a really nice, simple like Spanish Catalan restaurant. I want to experience more food from here, and like, just give me like some gazpacho soup or something, and I'll be very very happy. Don't try and overcomplicate it. It's the same when I go back to the UK. I will not often go to Spanish restaurants because it'll often be like knockoff imitations, which are not good. There are a couple I go to because I know that they are owned by Spanish people and they do it properly. But
I have the same experience in the States. My family always wanted to take me to Japanese restaurants. I was like, do not bring me there. Do not. When I was living in Japan, but like the last thing I wanted when I came home was a Japanese meal. Like that's the first thing. And then the second thing, if I did go for it, it would just be a pale imitation. These days, I've been out of Japan for so long that I'm sort of losing that reference, which in some ways is good and in other ways is bad. But yeah, it's totally different. I don't blame you at all for not wanting to have Spanish food when you're in Scotland.
So I guess the last question would be quite a nice one just to wrap up. This would be, obviously you've been back. I'm still in Spain, so I haven't had this feeling yet, but I feel I know how I would answer right now. Being back in the States for this long, how much do you miss Japan? Did you regret leaving when, I know obviously with circumstances you had to go just because of the jet program finishing and stuff, but like, how much do you miss that experience? And how much are you happy that you're back home? Or that part of you is like, if I could get on a plane now and go back, I would.
Well, it's changed over time. So the longer I've been in the States without going back to Japan, because I used to go back every year, and that stopped with the pandemic. So I haven't been back since 2019. So at this point, as much as I still love Japan and would like to go back, I'm no longer feeling the like driving desire to be like, oh, I have to go, like, get me out of here. I have to go back to Japan. But I definitely felt that in the past. where it was just like, what am I doing here? Like,
Hmm.
I'm I'm just far away from the culture that I like turned into my home, right? So
Sure.
yeah, I definitely had that experience for a while, and I would go back on trips, and it would be like, okay, and it was interesting because every time I would go back on a trip, right, the first time it was clear. I walked back into Japan, and it was like, oh, I'm home, and
Yeah.
then the next year, similar feeling but diminished, and then the next year, the same thing, similar feeling but diminished. After about
Wow.
5 years, um, like the very architecture of the city had that Hachinohe, because I would always go back to Hachinohe, had the whole like architecture of the city had changed, and like long-standing things that I would identify with had changed. Restaurants that I loved had closed, and it got to the point where it was like, this just isn't the same city that I knew and loved and thought of as home for all that time.
Right.
So I no longer had quite that same anchor. And
Hmm.
from that point forward, it sort of lessened my attachment, I think. Um,
Can you imagine it
but
now after 5 years of not going? It'd be even that feeling would probably be elevated even more. There'd be a lot
I
more
think
changes.
I think I would feel less like astonished because the last time I went to Japan, 2019, that was where I felt like I hit the bottom of the slow descent, where it was like, okay, I'm back in Hachinohe, and this just doesn't feel like Hachinohe anymore. It doesn't feel like the place that I lived for the 5 years that I was there. Um, and I feel like I've still got friends there, so I would still go back. Um, but like I used to deliberately plan on giving myself like 3 to 5 days out of a 2 week trip just in Hachinohe. And I didn't even need to see anyone. I could just walk around and visit the sites and be like, yeah, this is cool. I remember all this stuff
Hmm.
and reminisce and appreciate that. And I don't think I would do that anymore. I think enough of those places are gone that I would just plan a couple days to see my friends and that would be it. And that's just the nature of changing time, I think.
Yep.
And I still very much appreciate Japan, and I still would like to go back there for trips. And it's not like I'd be averse to moving back there, but especially compared to how I felt like after I came and initially moved back to the States, um, I don't feel that same sort of drive to be like, oh, I have to get back there somehow.
Mhm. Yeah. That's interesting. I don't know if I ever. I mean, yeah, it's really tricky. Because I'm still in that process of being here.
Mm,
I think because the circumstances, I we were a bit unsure in terms of, do we make our permanent home in Scotland, in England,
hmm
in Spain, somewhere else? Because the pandemic kind of forced me into this kind of like position. Then it's like,
hmm
well, I'm going to make the best of this, and we're going to see how it works. Um, and it's so weird. Like I was in Scotland really recently, and I'm gonna say
hmm
like we had an amazing time over there. The weather was amazing, and we were like in a really, I mean, all of Scotland, a lot of Scotland's beautiful anyway. We're in a really beautiful part of the country. Went on really nice walks, but there was that weird feeling when we landed back in
mm,
to Barcelona. I actually turned
hmm
to my wife and said, "We're home."
Yeah.
It's kind of this really weird feeling. I remember the first time too after the pandemic, not being in Edinburgh for like 2.5 years, more or less at that point. And it's kind of hard because I've
hmm
got quite of a complicated relationship with Edinburgh because obviously it's the place I went to as for university. It was the first place I lived independently. I obviously met my
hmm
wife there, and it's a fascinating city, and there's so much history to it. And I always recommend people to go to Edinburgh because it's such an amazing place to go to. But I remember like when I arrived back, I think my wife said like, "Are you excited to be back?" And it hadn't hit me yet. It's kind of
mm
weird. It's not like this. Oh my god, I'm back. I'm home. It's
hmm
really strange, and I kind of there's that weird expression like home is where the heart is. If your
Yeah.
heart is dedicated to that place for whatever reason it is, if it's through like a relationship or family or just you emotionally connect with that place, that's your home.
hmm
Doesn't matter if that's where you were
Yeah.
brought up or whatever. And then if that shifts over time, oh, okay, then that's just the way it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot to that. And I can tell you, like, in relation to my experience, right? Like, when I was living in Japan, I made a very strong friend group. just among the other ALTs and people in the area, and it was incredible. Just the friendships that I made there, I think really made the place. And I think I briefly mentioned this even at some point in my blog, where I went to stay with one of my friends because when I was walking Japan, I was like, well, I have to walk through Hachinohe. I lived there for 5 years. And so I ended up staying with a friend of mine, one of the people from those 5 years. And I was never as tempted to stop walking Japan as when I had to walk away from my friend.
Mm.
And I remember just being like, is this really what I want to do? Because the other thing too is at that point in the walk, I had just completed all of Hokkaido, all of the northernmost island of Japan, which is also like basically a third of the entire walk, it turns out, because Hokkaido is so big. Um, I had just completed a major section of the walk and then walked back to Hachinohe. So there's a sort of like bookend feel to it. So I was like, I could imagine stopping now and then taking however much time I had left on the hike, at least 2 months, and just hanging out in Hachinohe again. And but the more I thought about it, the more I was like, but a lot of the people, so some of my friends had stayed, but not all of them had. And I came to the realization that the life I wanted to live by not continuing the walk was not the life that I would have if I stayed.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, I think I need to keep going with this. And I kept going. And then, part of the reason I moved back to the States, because there was a little bit of an open question for a little while of was I going to stay in Japan? Because yeah, my like part in the JET program came to a close, but I wanted to be a translator, and it's pretty easy to find work as a translator in Japan, or especially comparatively to like halfway across the world, where you're sort of reliant on an agency. You can meet clients directly. It's better for your business. So there was a good question of, okay, am I just going to stay in Japan? And without going too far into it, because I don't want to be a downer, but my mom had just gotten sick, and I was like, okay, I need to go home and spend time with my parents.
Mm.
And that was a huge factor in my deciding I'm not going to stay in Japan. I'm going to move back. And after I made that transition, right, it's just like, okay, and now I've got my nieces and my nephew who's just been born. And I'm more attached to my family here, and that friend group is still dispersed. They've like scattered to the winds. We have like a weekly D&D game where most of us get together again, but um, that's all through the internet. So it's just like the life that I had there. Like you were saying, home is where the heart is. It's that part's gone, and the center has shifted. So I've
Sure.
shifted with it.
Yeah, and you can't. Yeah, that's the thing because everyone's going to be moving on with their own life, right? That
Mm-hmm.
concrete group of people, then they might not always be there. And then that's the thing too that a lot of people I don't think discuss enough when you talk about living, if it's even just for 1 year or for a whole, your whole life potentially, in another country. There is also that factor of who is it you're leaving behind, your family, your
Mm.
friend groups. I mean, I've had it like I can think like all the people I would consider friends, and I do,
Mm-hmm.
I consider them my friends here, but who are they really? I've met them all through my wife. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't got like somebody who I can say, this person is somebody from here, and I've met them on
Mm.
my own terms. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
them are through my wife. There are a couple who are through work.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like people who we meet up with regularly, maybe to socialize or people I'm in contact with, a lot of it is through my wife. Um, so yeah, then you think like I've left a lot of my friends who are back home, and yeah, and then family and all this, and then we're in that situation. It's like, well, if we're going to live permanently in Spain, then the summer's going to be spent in Scotland and all this sort of things. That's something you've got in your mind all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just yeah, life's that kind of thing where it's just you just got to go with the flow with it a little bit and just see what comes up. And yeah, you know that in the moment, right? I need to stay here or no, it's time to go. And if as
Mm-hmm.
long as you're happy with that decision in the end, then yeah, it's not an easy thing. But,
Yeah, agreed.
I think that's a good point to stop. I think
Yeah, I think so too.
people have seen me again for a second time plant my initial parsnip seeds.
Yeah.
So they're probably like, "Oh my goodness, what's he doing? He lost his whole field." So I think yeah, there is no doubt that there is definitely scope for more of this chat. If you're happy, Rook, to come back, then I'll be more than happy to have you back on here and we can carry on this conversation.
Oh, that would be great. This was a complete pleasure. Thank you so
Uh,
much for having me on.
oh, you're welcome. Anytime. I hope everybody enjoyed it. No doubt, Strider will be the first to watch. So hi, Strider, in advance. So yeah, we're gonna end the recording here. But thank you very much, everybody, for listening. And yeah, if it's sent you off to sleep or kept you busy or kept you occupied while you're doing chores or whatever it is, then we're happy, and that's the case. We've kept you company, I hope. And the thing is that you're in this video, Aruk, so you don't need to comment on this video.
That's true. Yeah. We'll see what I do.
You've done
I,
your
I
you've done your engagement already.
That's right. But
You're probably
I do want to say thank you to everyone who listened. I hope it was an interesting conversation for the rest of you. It was certainly, like I said, an absolute pleasure for me.
likewise. Yeah, it's just I kind of knew this was going to be the case anyway. But it's nice that it transpired that way. The minute that we just off camera, just on Discord, just mentioned a few things, I was like, oh, like this is just, I really want to delve into this sort of chat. Even if it's off camera or on camera, like it doesn't matter. There'd be a lot of stuff that we would, I think, a lot of mutual experiences and similar, tastes and interests and things. And yeah, that's definitely borne out to be true. So
Absolutely.
the I think we're gonna have to call it the Keeping You Company podcast now at this rate. The co podcast host chair is already always here for you, Rook. So you're welcome back anytime you like.
I appreciate that very much. I think I'll take you up on it.
And I hope the audio's been good. I know I've had some issues with OBS, so if there's been any audio issues, I do apologize, but hopefully it's been fine. And yeah, we'll stop here, and you can see me getting my first fishing rod again. See you all in another video very soon. Apologies again for the late episode, but we'll see you again hopefully at the beginning of July. There'll be more Stardew Valley action for you to watch along with. And yeah, take care, everybody. I hope you're all well wherever you are, and we'll see you very soon. Bye bye.